one to have dealt with adults posing as teenagers at sporting events in recent years. A 25-year-old man was arrested in Dallas in 2018 after posing as a 17-year-old high school student and becoming a star player on the basketball team. And in Memphis, a 22-year-old man was accused of faking transcripts so he could join a high school basketball team in 2013.
Edie, in our next story, pickleball is called the fastest growing sport in America, but that doesn't mean everybody likes it.
On March 1st, pickleball play at a park in Vienna, Virginia, will be limited to 3 days a week after numerous residents complained of the noise generated by paddles repeatedly thwacking balls, Fred. According to a piece by Dick Uliano of WTOP, the Fairfax Community's Town Council voted 5-2 last week to limit pickleball play at Glendon Park to Mondays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays, down from 7 days a week after neighbors reported the noise from pickleball had ruined the livability of their neighborhood and significantly decreased the value of their homes. The park's pickleball players say it's unfair to limit their play, particularly because Vienna has noise limit regulations and the sound of pickleball doesn't exceed those limits.
For those who might not know, the noise comes from plastic balls being hit by wooden paddles. And Edie, this is not the first controversy of its kind.
Now, Angela Woolsey with FFX Now wrote a story in advance of the town council's vote, noting that Vienna isn't the only place where homeowners and pickleball players have clashed. Her story notes that as the sport's popularity has grown, so have the noise complaints, including in nearby Arlington County, where residents living near the Walter Reed Community Center have threatened legal action over the infamous pickleball puck.
Edie, what's the next move now for the players in Vienna?
One pickleball fan said players are encouraged to buy quieter paddles, but he added that the games take place in a public park and parks are supposed to be used. The town council said they're looking for other parks that could host pickleball games without disturbing the neighbors.
Thanks, Edie.
Thanks for having me on the program today, Fred. I hope you have a fabulous week.
Edie Gross is with the Virginia Public Access Project. I'm Fred Eccles.
If you'd like to learn more about today's featured stories and others from around the state, you'll find a link to VA News on our website, radioiq.org.
You can make a lasting difference to sustain the outstanding programming you've enjoyed on public radio. A gift to WVTF and Radio IQ through your will, trust, or other estate plan is an easy way to recognize and sustain the public radio that is important to you. For more information about leaving WVTF and Radio IQ in your will or trust, contact your financial advisor or visit WVTF.org or RadioIQ.org. And thank you very much.
Radio IQ is supported in part by A.N. Culbertson and Company, independent wealth managers helping clients protect, grow, and transfer assets for 25 years. Fee-only advisors, Charlottesville. ANCulbertson.com. And from the Greater Lynchburg Community Foundation, investing in the community for 50 years, providing grants to nonprofits and educational scholarships. More at lynchburgfoundation.org.
Checking temperatures around the region right now. We have 34 in Wise, Blacksburg 44, Roanoke 48 degrees, Charlottesville 46, 55 in Fredericksburg, 41 in Richmond. Some clouds starting out, but we'll see widespread sunshine later on. High temperatures in the upper 40s to around 55 for Roanoke, 57 in Richmond. Clear starting out this evening, then some clouds will move in overnight. Lows in the upper 20s to around 35 for Wise. Highs tomorrow in the low 50s to around 60 for Roanoke and Danville.
Why consumers might feel it if the U.S. government can't pay what it owes.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by the United States Postal Service, offering postage stamps for purchase at more than 40,000 supermarkets, drugstores, office suppliers, and wholesale clubs.
I'm David Brancaccio in New York. We will lead with the fight over raising America's debt ceiling to pay for past Democratic and Republican spending, with actual U.S. government defaults expected to start in late spring unless some deal is reached. Some House Republicans are using the ceiling to pressure Congress into unspecified spending cuts. The head of the International Monetary Fund has just warned that U.S. consumers will suffer if this happens. Marketplace's Nancy Marshall-Genzer has that.
International Monetary Fund Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva tied the fate of U.S. consumers directly to the debate over the debt ceiling in an interview on 60 Minutes. Congress has to raise or suspend the debt limit so the U.S. government can continue borrowing money to pay its bills. Otherwise, the U.S. will default on its debt. Congressional Republicans want Democrats to agree to budget cuts in exchange for raising or suspending the debt ceiling. The Biden administration says that's a separate discussion. Georgieva told 60 Minutes the pandemic and the war in Ukraine have taught us that what she calls the unthinkable can happen. If the U.S. did default, it would be a lot harder for the federal government to borrow money in the future. It would pay a much higher interest rate. That would trickle down to consumers because rates on things like mortgages, car loans, and credit cards are tied to what the U.S. pays on Treasury bonds. I'm Nancy Marshall-Genzer for Marketplace.
Netflix customers have been expressing annoyance, if not anger, after reports the streaming platform would take its crackdown on password sharing from overseas test markets and deploy them in the U.S. The company has since walked that back, saying it posted the new restrictions accidentally. But according to research from Oxford Economics, streaming customers have a lot more to be grunting about, like too many different streaming options. And the thing you do want to watch is often on the one you haven't signed up for yet. Marketplace's Savannah Marr has that.
If The Sopranos ushered in the golden age of TV, shows like Stranger Things and White Lotus are marks of the surplus era,
where we are so overwhelmed.
Brandon Katz follows the entertainment industry for Parrot Analytics. Even 5 years ago, he says most customers only needed 1 or 2 subscriptions.
It wasn't really quite the Hunger Games of entertainment via internet delivery that we have today.
In today's fractured landscape, Katz says couch potatoes like himself have to shell out a lot of money to keep up with the most popular shows and movies. And according to Sundus Alfie at Oxford Economics, all those options don't necessarily translate to customer satisfaction.
Well, you sign off work and then you try to find something to watch. Takes more than 10 minutes, you get frustrated, and then you're done with it.
Oxford Economics survey of customers found they want everything in one place.
Whatever streaming service I'm consuming my shows or movies, on that homepage, I want to see my music, my e-commerce, maybe messaging apps.
To hold on to subscribers, she says streamers will have to make themselves indispensable. I'm Savannah Marr for Marketplace.
Stock index futures are down, with S&P futures down 0.8%. NASDAQ futures down 1%. Friday's nice and hot jobs report, the lowest unemployment since May of 1969, has investors jittery about interest rates staying higher longer. And the computer and cloud services company Dell said today it's cutting 6,600 jobs, about 5% of its workforce.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by Progressive. Progressive Commercial Auto Insurance protects the cars, trucks, and vans that work to keep small businesses moving forward, including protection while running errands and other tasks. More at progressivecommercial.com. And by Paychecks, where HR, insurance, benefits, and payroll integrate into one platform. Whether 2 or 2,000 employees, Paychecks can help make HR simple for businesses and employees.
Our relationship with animals is evolving, and in some cases, so are zoos. Some zoological gardens date back to the late 19th century, and some of those are spending millions to update structures constructed in a very different time. Marketplace's Stephanie Hughes reports.
When visitors first enter the Maryland Zoo in Baltimore, they pass Victorian-era wrought iron cages. Signs with black and white photos show animals that used to live there, including bears, hippos, and hyenas. 67-year-old visitor Linda Hanna remembers seeing them as a child.
I felt like they paced a lot, and you just felt sorry for them.
We are the 3rd oldest zoo in the country, and we have evolved quite a bit over the past almost 150 years.
Kirby Fowler is president and CEO of the zoo and was behind the decision to reopen this older section to the public in 2021.
For people to walk past these cages and understand that these are not good habitats for animals, that's an important lesson to send to people. Oh, sorry. That's one of our peahens.
The zoo is planning to keep 3 of the cages and is raising millions of dollars to build more natural habitats, including one for primates. Fowler points to the zoo's otter exhibit as an example. It has a waterfall, rocks, and a glass wall that visitors peer through as the female otter dives for fish. One child trails a stick along the glass, which she seems to follow. Zookeeper Danielle Regan calls for the male otter to join.
Hudson!
And seconds later, he comes scampering over the rocks.
They know their names. They're highly intelligent and also highly motivated.
This exhibit's a far cry from those cages, which were part of many urban zoos.
They were designed around having a lot of animals in a small space.
Nigel Rothfels is a historian and author of Savages and Beasts, The Birth of the Modern Zoo. Some zoos have repurposed old buildings as event spaces for weddings, or in the case of the Maryland Zoo, a brunch for grown-ups called the Flamingo.
It's that whole piece of recognizing, okay, we're doing more than just exhibiting animals. And part of it is diversifying the revenue.
It costs at least $40,000 a day to run the Maryland Zoo. As a nonprofit, it gets funds from private donations, state support, and admissions, plus extras. Like for $5, visitors can feed acacia leaves to a giraffe.
So I'll give you one.
Thank you.
Today, there's a short line waiting with zookeeper James Sedano.
All right, so what you guys are going to do is just reach on out. You're going to give her the entire piece all at once. She'll take the entire piece with her tongue.
A visitor hands a small acacia branch to the giraffe, who takes it without a hitch, raising some money while getting people invested in the animals. In Baltimore, I'm Stephanie Hughes for Marketplace.
Flamingo. In New York, I'm David Brancaccio, Marketplace Morning Report. From 8 p.m., American Public Media.
Next time on The World, singer-songwriter Danny Larkin. She was raised on the border between Ireland and Northern Ireland. She's too young to have lived through the Troubles, but growing up, she experienced the tension and the conflict and something else.
Kindness and a willingness to create change. That is something that we constantly seek out.
Danny Larkin, next time on The World.
You can hear The World Monday through Thursday at 3 on Radio IQ.
Radio IQ is broadcasting in digital on WVTF Roanoke, WRIQ Charles City Richmond, WURV Richmond, WVTU Charlottesville, WVTW Charlottesville, WVTR Marion, WISE FM Wise, WQIQ Spotsylvania, WIQR Lexington, WEHC Emory, WLUR Lexington, and in Richmond on 92.5 and Fredericksburg on 94.9. Radio IQ, a service of Virginia Tech.
Welcome to NewsHour from the BBC World Service. I'm Razia Iqbal. There have been two powerful earthquakes centered in southeastern Turkey and northern Syria, but felt in 4 countries. The death toll is at least 1,500 and thousands more injured. Our program is dominated by what appears to be the worst earthquake in Turkey since 1939. The Turkish Red Crescent is leading a huge rescue operation.
We are trying to organize in 10 different cities. Some of the hospitals are also filled with injured people. Probably the casualties are just going to go up.
And in northern Syria, snow and rain are making a devastating situation more difficult.
People are so scared to return to their building, despite the rain, despite the snow, despite the low temperature outside.
One other headline, Hong Kong's largest national...
Everybody.
Good morning.
Let me welcome you to the February 6th City Council Chamber for our Roanoke City Council and Roanoke City School Board joint meeting. And let me say I'm delighted and pleased to have our Roanoke City Public Schools representation here, the superintendent and all the council members and my buddy, the school board chair, Chairman Jameson, and everybody. So what I'll do is I'll ask our clerk, Ms. Susan McCord, to please call the roll, and following that, I'll ask the chair of the school board to have her clerk call the roll. All right. Ms. McCord.
Yes. Vice Mayor Cobb.
Here.
Ms. White Boyd. Here. Mr. Vollison.
Here.
Ms. Moon Reynolds. Here. Ms. Sanchez Jones. Here. Mr. Pretty. Here. And Mayor Lee.
Here. And a quorum is present. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Huffman, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Apel. Present. Mrs. Casola. Mr. Kathy.
Here.
Mr. Cherry.
Here.
Ms. Saunders. Mrs. Watkins. Here. Dr. Jamison.
Here. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Let me say this is always a good meeting for us to get together, and let me share with the school board and the superintendent and her staff that we are very much appreciative of all the work you do, and this is probably, no doubt about it, you all the board, and we appoint a lot of boards and committees, but you all are the most important ones we have, because you're the face of Roanoke City Public Schools. And while I'm saying that, let me take this moment to recognize our school superintendent, Ms. Felita White, who is Region 6 Superintendent of the Year. Yes. And we want to recognize her and give her, and hopefully she'll move on to get even the national honor. So congratulations, Superintendent.
Thank you, Mayor Lee.
Okay. Let's give her a hand. And I saw something else. Did you, so much stuff comes across my desk, but your dissertation or something, was that done now?
Yes, sir.
So does your title name change now?
Okay.
Doctor. Doctor. Okay.
Still getting used to it.
All right. Well, congratulations so much, and we're very pleased and honored to have you. All right. Okay. The school board chairman, Dr. Jameson, and I talked a lot about our agenda, and we are on a time scale. We want to keep time, not to delay. We're going to give everybody a chance to say what they have to say. And but we got a big agenda here today on council, but we want everybody to feel comfortable and have a chance to comment to us on things that they feel important, and we have a few issues. So, Dr. Jameson, we have items for discussion by the City Council and School Board, and I'll tell you what I think we'll do is I'll ask the council members to sort of lead us in the discussions, or I'll lead that, and then we'll get our comments from the school system. All right, and you can chime in anytime you got a question or not clear on something. Everybody feel it. We want to feel informed. I want you to feel this is not a formal process. Got questions, we can ask them. Please do that. All right? First, go ahead.
Before we get started on our first item, I was hoping to introduce to you people that we think are very special guests today. Before we get rolling, we are very pleased that we have our inaugural year of student representatives to the school board. This is a program that we've been in the making and policy making for a couple of years, and I would like to invite them to come up so you can meet them. They have been given a special excuse by the superintendent to miss class this morning so that they can be here. And this is Miss Yolanda Joseph and Mr. Connor Sink, and they represent both our high schools, and they were really pleased to come meet you all this morning on council. So thank you. If you all would introduce yourselves and
Good morning. My name is Yolanda Joseph. I am a senior at Patrick Henry High School.
Good morning. My name is Connor Sink. I'm a senior at William Fleming High School.
We wanted to thank you guys for choosing us as the first student reps of Roanoke City. It's an incredible experience and we are extremely grateful.
As student representatives, we were able to establish a link between students and teachers and the school board in Roanoke City Public Schools, providing valuable information to the school board members as well as to the students of Roanoke City.
So thank you for your time. Thank you for inviting us to this meeting, and we can't wait to see what happens here.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can see that our first members have knocked it out of the park. So they've set a high bar for future
Yes,
student
they
representatives.
have.
So thank you for taking a moment.
Oh, thank you, and we thank you all, and that's great. Any council members don't have anything to say? That's outstanding.
Welcome aboard.
Well, welcome. I just had a quick question for Chair Dr. Jameson. What was the process that they were selected? Did they have to offer themselves, or what happened there?
Yeah, I mean, I might ask Mr. Cherry if he'd like to, because Mr. Cherry and Ms. Saunders, who will join us shortly, were our committee members who shepherded that process.
So it would be Ms. Saunders and I went to both Fleming and I need the microphone. Okay, can you hear me now? Ms. Saunders and I went to both Fleming and PH. We both kind of talked about our journeys, our process. Then we talked about the opportunities that we wanted to introduce to the system in terms of school board buddies. And then we started that process as if anybody had interest, they were to go to the principal. They applied. We had a deadline, went through an interview process, interviewed students, got to talk to different students, and then that's how that was chosen. But then even the ones that weren't chosen, we started a superintendent advisory council as well. So we didn't want to kind of start a system of elitism. We still wanted to give an opportunity for every student. So,
Thank you for that information. I encourage you all, once you turn 18, you can apply to be on the school board.
That's true.
All right. The first item on our agenda is liaisons and school board buddies. And we've been having that system for a number of years, and each one of us. And let me, first of all, again, the two new school board members, city council members, Mr. Volson and Mr. Pretty. We've talked a little bit about this process. Do you all realize who your buddies are? Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. All right. We want to just talk about that and how that's working and what we do. And I will just start off and just talk about my buddy, the chairman here. But we communicate, and one of the things we do is there are a lot of things that happen during the school year. And we only meet maybe a couple of times a year, and maybe one more time if possible. But we talk to our school buddies, and I've talked with a superintendent, and if it's an issue that you need to go, I'm sure she's open to talk with you about any matter. But your buddies ought to help us to keep up with some things. If there's some questions, you talk to them. I know Dr. Jameson has been very informative, and we talk about things that are going on in our meetings and issues that we need to have more information on. So I think the buddy system works well, and I think it's been a valuable resource to me. So I like that system. I think it's something that works well. So that's our point of discussion right now. Any questions or thoughts you have on the buddy system or how we can improve it? Dr. White?
I mean, the only thing I might add is that we as a school board, when we talk about the buddy system, we use it intentionally. If we know there's something that might catch you off guard, we try to tell everybody to reach out to your buddy. We try not to have news that you could have heard from us first. Often you already know it, but we try to make sure that we touch base with you on those points. Yeah, and there's been a recent shuffle of buddies, and that's because there's been a recent shuffle of council members. Mm-hmm. So that's about all I would add. I would echo your sentiments. And often it's whatever you and your buddy make it.
Right. And make sure you got the phone number. Sometimes I can't find my buddy's phone number. I got to call the world. I thought I had it in my directory. It's not there. So, but it's good. I think
So I
it works.
texted him.
It works well. Believe me, it works very well, and I'm pleased. Any other thoughts on that? All right. Well, we move on. We had 5. That's less than the 5 minutes
we're
we
on
did.
schedule. Let's
Okay.
go.
Bob, can I call on you? We want going down to funding.
Sure.
To share thoughts on that, and I'm sure we'll go get some information from the school board. But
Yeah, and I'll start, and I think there's actually some information that schools put together on this, and I'll just sort of clarify, I think, from conversations that the council has had at the retreats and then individually, sort of the intent on this is predominantly sort of a reminder, a refresher of what the formula is, how it's used, how it benefits the school and the city and its funding mechanisms, how we work together in shaping that, and I've already said this, how it's been amended over the years. There is, by agreement, a review of it every 3 years, and so that's where those amendments in the past have taken place as they've worked their way through that. So that was the intent, just to sort of remind everyone of sort of what's in the formula, and then ultimately, from the school's perspective, how they use that and match that up to the funding that they receive from the state in order to do what they need to do. We do have, each of you were provided, council members, you were provided kind of just that, what the current agreement reads as well. And again, I believe that the school has some additional information that they're going to share with you also. Thank you.
okay, Dr. White. I like that.
Thank you, and good morning, Mayor Lee, and good morning, Chair Jamison, and members of the City Council, as well as members of the school board. So it is an honor and pleasure to be here this morning. We do have some information based on the questions that have been gathered and some of the topics that you wanted to discuss today. So we thought we would kind of structure it in a bit of a presentation today. We will stop in between so that we have adequate time for discussion and Q&A. But our goal today is to address the topics, again, that you've submitted, including a review of our current budget funding formula and an overview of how we develop our capital plan, as well as our facility use agreements and how we measure student performance. And certainly we want to have time, hopefully there will be time at the end to talk about any legislative matters that are impacting education right now. So we'll cover that as well. But first, however, I'd like to begin, and if we could advance the slide, we'd like to begin with a thank you. I don't know who has kind of power over our slides, but I do want to start with a thank you. Oh, it's me.
And it looks like everybody's discovered it, but you have a copy of the whole packet.
Thank you.
Yes, we'd like to start with a thank you to the council and to our school board. So with the council's financial commitment to our school system, as well as to the school board's thoughtful governance, we're able to meet the needs of our students and staff and work every single day to do so in a thoughtful way. So for instance, we have been able, as you can see on the screen here, we've been able to increase salaries for our teachers and staff members so that we can attract and retain the best of the best, because that's who our students deserve in front of them, the best of the best. And so as we stand here today, we're able to say what many urban districts cannot say, and that we are 99% staffed with our teaching positions. As we stand here today, we have about 15 out of 1,100 teaching positions filled. Great. And a lot of urban school districts cannot say that today. I think that deserves a little bit of a round of applause.
All right. I like that.
And again, we are able to invest in college and workforce development. And so I know that this was something that the community talked about as well, especially when I first came on board, that we wanted not only college readiness programs, but we wanted workforce development programs as well. So we've been able to make those investments, those very important investments, so that our students are able to graduate not only with the diploma, but also with the resume of skills and experiences that will give them a leg up on the competition. And so we certainly can't do any of this if we're not safe. So that third rung that you see there that is so critically important, if you'll remember, we had a safety summit last spring, and we had 25 recommendations that, thanks to our school board, were approved and have been implemented. So these improvements and enhancements are underway. And so we're just very, very grateful, because without the governance and the funding, we wouldn't be able to do any of it. So thank you again for that. So we know that the first item that you wanted to talk about was the funding formula. Now, you've asked about the reason why we use a funding formula and how it's applied during the budget process through now and through the year. And you've also asked about the role of the state and federal funding. So as you can see here, I'm joined by members of my staff who will be coming up to the podium as well. They are my content experts, if you will, who will be coming up to join me in this presentation today. So first, I'll ask Mrs. Jackson if she's going to come forward to talk about funding a bit. She's our Chief Financial Officer. And again, you have a copy of the PowerPoint in front of you. Now, the copy that you have in front of you is more comprehensive than what we're going to go through today. Some of the slides will not be on the screen, only for the sake of time, but we wanted you to have the information because we know that you're interested in the various details when it comes to funding. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Jackson, and I'll give you the clicker so you will have it.
Thank you. All right. Good morning, Mayor Lee, Chair Jameson, and members of City Council and the school board. As Dr. White mentioned, starting with our funding formula, and as Mr. Cal said, you have a copy of that, but just hitting the highlights. Of course, it was adopted back in 2011 and has been amended a time or two. The most recent amendment, to my understanding, was May of 2018. And at its heart, that funding formula provides 40% of local taxes, minus a few exceptions that are specified for by the policy for particular uses within the city. That 40% of local taxes supports education in Roanoke City Public Schools. We receive 1/12 of that budgeted amount each month, and that helps us with our operational needs, running the school division throughout the year. That funding formula also spells out the timeline for projecting the next year funding and budget adoption, and so it helps us on our side, on the school side, as well as the city budgeting process, so that we all kind of know that timeline, and as well as the year-end timeline for finalizing the true-up of funding that is spelled out by the policy as well. I just have on here, just for a point of reference, in our 21-22 fiscal year, we had just under $89 million that was funded to the schools by the city. That's about 33% of total revenue, all in, all funds for the school division. So just kind of food for thought in thinking about that funding formula. Kind of we went through pros and cons of some of the things that we've experienced over the years using that formula. One of the major positives that we have experienced, and I hope I can say the same for the city team as well, it really helps us focus during that budget development process on moving both the schools and the city forward. Rather than competing over dollars, any kind of focus there, we're really focusing on moving forward. It makes it easier for the city and school management teams to plan and prepare budgetarily. Again, I'm speaking for the city, so Mr. Cowell, you can certainly chime in if you would like to, but just in my experience, having a wonderful working relationship with the budget and finance department at the city, really work as a team throughout that process to move everyone forward. The formula ties the financial outcomes of the city and schools together. We all benefit in good times, and we all weather the hard times together. And in my time with the school division, we've had a little bit of both. So that certainly, again, it makes us one team. We're all kind of in this together and working towards the same goal. And lastly, the retention of the fund balance at year end incentivizes well thought out and planned use of funds and helps fund the renovation and or rebuilding of school facilities. And I know capital improvement is on the agenda, so we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a little bit. On the challenging side, a couple things. Of course, inflation is a challenge, and I'm sure you hear about that in terms of the overall city budget as well. And secondly, we're educating more students who have greater needs today than perhaps they did a decade or two ago, and with less funding on a per pupil basis. So that first chart shows you inflation adjusted local funding of schools on a per pupil basis. So you see as our enrollment has gone up over that time, so the amount available per pupil in terms of the spending ability has steadily gone down. The chart to the right kind of gives you a sense, and again, I'm sure this is no different from what you hear about the city as a whole with inflation. The green bars show funding of schools over the last decade in actual dollars. The red line shows inflation adjusted. So you see where the buying power of that funding truly lands, and then the blue line shows you what our enrollment has done over that time. So you see we are educating more students with that funding, which with inflation, of course, makes that challenging. I wanted to share a little bit, particularly kind of from an education standpoint for some of our newer members, how that funding of schools, that funding formula dollars, how that is used by the school division, and particularly other areas of priority that I know the city has that are supported by that funding. I tried to put this in sort of the language that the city budget uses to help tie that together, hopefully. But for example, the first item, public safety, a portion of that funding of schools comes back to the city to fund a portion of the public safety budget for those school resource officers. And I'll note that that $500,000 number is a low number because, as I'm sure most of you will recall, all of us had a challenge and still have a challenge, but particularly in the 21-22 school year with filling positions. So that was really, we were not able to fill all of the positions for school resource officers that we had previously in prior years. So, but nonetheless, public works, stormwater fees, radio support is a portion that we pay for. We fund a portion of the cost of municipal audit, so that municipal audit will provide that service to the schools as well as other city departments. Under Health and Human Services, the school division uses a portion of those funds to fund the local share of Children's Services Act for students who are placed in private day for public school students. And the last biggest one, of course, is the maintenance of the school buildings. That is the responsibility of the school board. So we use a portion of those funds to fund the debt service on any school renovation or building projects for our school buildings. I'm going to stop there. As Dr. White mentioned, you do have a few other slides. I know the chief focus was on local funding, but there were a few questions, I believe, about kind of overall funding and how we spent our money. So I've added that, and we're certainly happy to take questions or comments on that, but I will stop there and open it up for discussion.
All right. Any questions thus far?
I have a question, and I'm not sure where it would be relevant otherwise in the agenda today. Well, when it comes to funding and salary levels for our teachers, how competitive is our pay? And then I know we're 99% staffed, but what is the tenure like of our workforce? How much, like what percentage of that are fairly new teachers versus teachers who have worked with the schools for a long time? And for teachers that are leaving our school district, are they going to other school districts, or what professions are they going into? Are they retiring?
I can speak to at least part of that. In terms of the competitiveness of our pay, we were fortunately able to make great strides to kind of reset our pay and make a market adjustment to make our pay competitive, particularly in the local area last school year. So as Dr. White mentioned, we did make a significant adjustment to our pay scale for our teacher staff in order to make sure that our pay is as competitive, or actually this past year, the most competitive in the area. When looking at it, when we were at this point last year in the budget cycle, found that we were below 2 other competitor districts in the area. And just with the struggles that we had, particularly in 21-22, with the vacancies that we were unable to fill, we had to take action, and so we're pleased to be able to do that. So this current year, we are the most competitive in terms of teacher pay in the area, and we're doing all that we can, hopefully, this year to stay there now that we've kind of made it to that point. Of course, everybody is doing their budgeting process same as we are, so it's hard to know what other school divisions will do, but that's our hope, that we will move our pay forward in a comparable way to what other school divisions are considering and keep ourselves there. In terms of the experience level of our teachers, I know that the vast majority are in their first 5 years of experience. We do run the gamut. We have, in fact, at a recent school board meeting, typically we look at 30 years of experience. Our pay scale for teachers is aligned to years of experience. So where you are on the scale equates to how many years of teaching experience you bring to the school division. And so I typically looked at 0 through 30 plus. And actually, I broke out that 30 plus because we have some teachers who have 40, 45, close to 50 years of experience. Not a lot, but we do have quite a few that stick with us beyond that 30 years. But that said, I don't have the exact numbers with me, but the vast majority I would say are in their first 5 years. May I ask Dr. White or Mr. McKee, maybe I can't really speak to where people go. Do you want?
Well, it's Councilman Pretty. It's like you peaked in my dissertation because I did study this. But in terms of what our teachers need, and just as Mrs. Jackson stated, many teachers are within that 5-year range, right? Their first 5 years. We know that in urban school districts, a lot of time, only half are retained. New teachers are retained within the first 3 to 5 years, right? And so they will stay, however, and we conducted a huge exit survey that we will be sharing with our school board coming up. But in terms of the exit survey, we know that teachers are more likely to stay if there's accountability. We know that there's, if they have the pay recognition, if they are able to form relationships with their peers, if they're able to have work-life balance, and if they have an organizational structure that supports them. So the structure of the organization, again, has to be set up in a way that supports them, and they have to have not only pay recognition, but recognition in order to stay. So, and you asked about where they're going. Many times we find that teachers want to serve. That's why they're in teaching, and they want to serve the public. And if they feel that they have to choose and that they have to leave education, public education, because they're missing some of the factors that I noticed, that I mentioned, then they're still moving into like the healthcare industry or human service industries.
Good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Not for you, Dr. White. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, if I can, I have a question for Ms. Jackson. I was just wondering, have you gotten an update on the calculation error at the state? And I have also another question after that.
Yes, ma'am. Actually, for those who may not be aware, I know it's been in the press quite a bit that there was an error to the calculation tool that the Virginia Department of Education uses to break down the state budget into what that actually means for funding for each individual school division. And that error was unfortunately resulted in a significantly lower amount of funding for every school division in Virginia than what was anticipated. For Roanoke City Public Schools, it equated to about $780,000 this current year and about $1.9 million next year. I have just heard this morning that I believe that the General Assembly has that both houses have come out with their versions of the budget and are taking action to hold school divisions harmless from that. So that's certainly good news. I have not seen the specifics of that just yet because I just learned that, but that is good news, and it's helpful that it's about a week before we were anticipating the General Assembly to take action and come forward with their budget proposal. So that helps us with planning to have that information a little earlier.
Well, I appreciate that update, and I also want to say I really appreciate the fact that you prefaced by saying we want to work as partners and be a partnership, and we really appreciate that because, like you said, you are able with the financing to attract and retain really good employees. On the flip side of that, as you know, the city is struggling, and I don't know if you all know that, and I think it's an opportunity for us to make sure that people understand the challenges that we have on our side, because unfortunately we are in the midst of compensation studies, and we're trying to get city employees to a level just to reach market, not to exceed, but just to reach market so that we can retain the ones that we have. And actually, unfortunately, we've lost a few to our CPS, and because you're able to pay more. So we have to look at other ways that we can make up that difference, and I think that is by having the partnerships, like sharing your resources, your parks and your recs and all of that. I mean, your school system with parks and recs. And so we're working on that relationship, but it has really, really been a struggle. But, you know, nobody wants to interfere with our funding for our schools, because we appreciate what you do, and our schools are important to us. They're just as important to us as they are to you. But I do think that I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the challenges that we have on our side, because we are struggling with funding on our side, and it has impacted our employees, in particular the compensation. So there's nothing you guys can do about that. I just want to make you aware of it, and that I appreciate the fact that you all are grateful for the funding, because it leaves us with some interesting formulas and calculations of our own to try to get our employees where we would like for them to be. But I just wanted to put that out there. I mean, it's no secret. I just wanted to make sure people were aware of it.
Just thank you, Councilwoman White-Boyd. I just wanted to reiterate that as well. I think one of the things that makes our city and our schools shine is our long-term collaborative work together, and I think that's the value of these meetings. And we hit a bump, as everybody did with COVID, and now I think we're back on track with these regular meetings, and it's why I think the regular conversations we have with our school board colleagues is so critical, so that as we're navigating these waters of challenges that we face, none of it's a surprise, but that we're looking together creatively at how we can help each other. Because the more we convey that to the public, it reflects the reality of what we're all trying to work on. So I would just say, especially as we get to year end and the true up process, that that may be a really animated conversation at times about where our needs are and what our challenges are, but let's just be really open about that and work together to find a way to address the challenges that we're facing. The other thing I wanted to just ask is I'm so excited about the expansion of ROTEC, and this will probably come up with capital improvements, and if you want to wait till then to address it, I'm just curious how the construction and the progress is going with that new campus. And then with SROs, I know that some of that funding is reflected here. It's also my understanding that there was some funding from the state that helped supplement that this past year. Is that accurate?
That is correct, that we've received grant funding that is helping to support the cost of school resource officers.
And are we as fully staffed as we can be with those officers? Or what's the breakdown of like personnel with schools? The ratio, I guess is what I'm asking.
Currently, sir, we're at 14 deputies and 17 elementary schools, and we're at 8 police officers, where we should have 9 in the secondary, middle, or high schools.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other question? council or school board members?
Mayor, if I may, just for clarity's sake, this, under the policy, as I mentioned, it's structured that every 3 years, minimum every 3 years, there would be a sort of revisiting of the formula and a determination as to whether any amendments or anything would take place. As noted, the last time an amendment took place was in 18. In 21, we actually used a setting similar to this to conclude that there were no desired changes as we go forward. So my question is, 23 is that third year this year. So my question is, do we want to use this meeting to state that we have reviewed the policy, therefore are in compliance with that provision of it, and sort of consider 23 closed, if you will, for amendments, or is this something that you want to bring back at a later date to talk further regarding that provision of the policy?
Well, it would be my desire, Mayor, not to make that decision today if we had to make it today. I would rather we didn't.
I was just going to say that I think it's worth talking about, discussing. And my question was, I didn't get to, now that I've got the floor, was what was the amendment in 2018? Does anyone know what that was?
Yeah, it had to do with the exceptions to the policy. So it was amended, to recognize an allowance for the deduction of the portion of the admissions tax piece of that. So if you recall, for those certain things like funding that we receive that goes to VBR, funding that we receive that go to the special districts like DRI and Williamson Road, this included acknowledgement that funding we received through the admissions tax was excluded from the formula. So that was the last change.
Okay. And because I bring that up with regards to having discussion, because it depends on how our revenues may be trending, and if we're still looking at the 40%, we could find ourselves in a challenging position and trying to figure out how to continue programs and continue services. So it's not that I'm looking to change the formula, but perhaps look at how we do business going forward. So I think it is something worth looking at. And trying to see even if we look at the surplus, but it's just something we just need to look at, I believe.
Yeah, based on the current challenges that we're facing, Mayor, I agree with Ms. Moon Reynolds that we probably do need to have some discussion about it because we do have some massive challenges ahead of us with public safety.
Whether it's a committee or something.
Well, I think Bob's question was, do we do it now or do it later?
I believe just do it later. I don't think it's time. This is the appropriate time to do it with everything else that we have to cover. That I just think it's something that needs to come forward, whether it's through a committee or some sort to bring it back to the joint board for discussion at a later date.
Yeah, it would be really complicated to try to do that now, Mayor.
Yes.
And I will certainly coordinate with the superintendent what that might look like and when we could bring something, because it sounds like then we would use as kind of the bookend of that would be the next joint meeting, so something between now and then that the staffs would actually talk further, if that sounds okay.
In the creation of this formula, it was my understanding that it was members of council and members of the school board who met on a regular basis to discuss issues just like this.
Yes.
So I just mentioned that to put that on the table, if that is of interest, to open lines of communication so we can fully understand one another's position going forward. I'll speak for myself. I would also need Ms. Jackson in the room because I'd get out of my depth financially, budgetarily quite quickly, but if there's going to be ongoing conversations, I would just echo the original process for consideration.
Sure, absolutely.
I agree.
Yes, I agree. I agree with that.
I would prefer it not be a committee and that it be us
A task
talking.
force?
Yes.
Yeah. Of sorts.
You said task force, Ms. Johnson?
Well, I mean, if it's not a committee, I was trying to think what you call it. So.
Yeah, that's what I meant, similar task force for better.
Yeah, but you mean
yes.
because
I'm thinking the entire council and the entire board. I just don't.
I don't know. Is that the original way it was done? The entire
No,
council? I was going to say I don't think that would be appropriate, but.
Well, it was a group, not a task force, but council
Group,
and the school board, and we got together and
they appointed two primary members who met regularly.
It was the Joint Services Committee.
Okay.
Yes, which has not met in years. It was with Dick Willis and Bill Beskich were the two school board members, and then you had staff that served on that. Yes.
we'll get together, I'll get together with Bob, and and Vice Mayor, we'll talk, and we'll come up with something, but everybody, we'll make it as exclusive. It's not, we huddling up behind the doors and that. We'll make sure you're comfortable with it. All right?
Thank you.
So we're going to go forward with it later on. Yes, sir.
Mayor Lee, I was just going to ask before we move on from the funding topics, it seems to be wrapping up. I know council members are mentioning issues that we're having with our own staffing workforce, and we've even developed our own policy recently of having an unassigned balance. I was just wondering if you could speak more to what are some of the challenges that the school board and school system is facing with funding generally over expenses that they do not particularly control, like the Children's Services Act and other capital improvements. And then talk a little bit more about the importance of the unassigned balance and what that prepares the school to be able to do for the future.
Sure.
Does this move us into the next agenda? Mr. Pretty, if you would, I know they're going to talk about our fund balance and then move right into CIP if that's at the pleasure of the body. Mr. Mayor, if that's okay with you as well.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Jamison. And with your permission, we would like to move to the capital. I know that you have use of facilities as the very next item, but because we're in this funding discussion, it might be better if we just go ahead with the CIP discussion, if that's okay, Mayor Lee and Dr. Jamison, to move in that direction. Very good. But I must say, as the work groups are being formed and the task force and the all of the commissions on funding, as a public school advocate, I would be remiss if I didn't just say, just for food for thought, that we are in a people business, as all of us are. And I know that we share the same heart. And I know that we share the same heart for children. And if we don't start early with our children, then many times we're faced in the city with issues later on.
Agreed.
So I would say that as an advocate for public education, that we do have to, and I know that you do, keep in mind that we have to make sure that we are attracting the best of the best, that we are never forgetting these faces of our students, because we're not just shuffling paper. We are in a human business where we need human beings to relate to our students. Many times our students who are coming with greater challenges today than they've had before. Many of our students are very anxious, especially since COVID. They're coming with they're more delayed, developmental delays, and they're coming with greater deficits, particularly in urban education. And so we face that, and we're okay. We're all in. Put us in, Coach. We're all in. But we do need the resources to be all in. And so the reason why we started with a thank you is because in other places, I mean, in my previous work, we had a meeting called the Begathon. Real thing, right? Where superintendents had to go and beg for funding. So I would just say that I know that that's not the case here. And some of the things that we can do with guaranteed funding, really, it helps us to plan and it helps us to serve our students. And so I just wanted to circle back and say thank you again. And I know that the discussions will be had, and I know that they are valuable discussions, and they should be had. I just wanted to give you something to think about while you're having it.
Mrs. White, before you move forward.
Okay. Oh, no, I was just going to say, Dr. White, were those school boards, were they elected by any chance?
Hybrid.
Hybrid.
Hybrid. Partially appointed
and
partially elected.
Thank
you.
I know this is all going to come up in discussions, but I did want to piggyback as well and just, say in the research that I've done, and when I first came on the school board, I found that how well our schools do has a direct impact on what businesses and people we can bring into our city as well. The real estate, the first thing that people look at when they decide to move here or bring businesses here is what are our school systems doing? What is our school system doing? In what neighborhood do I want to move? Based on how our schools are doing. So, I mean, I think that our partnership is extremely important, and we do have to think about the impact of, or how important the school system is to our community as a whole.
All right, yeah, you all raise your hand over there. All right, Ms. Sanchez, Joan.
Dr. White, my understanding was from previous council members is that the reason why they came to the 40% formula is that so superintendents and the school didn't have to come in for a begathon. So I just want to remind everybody that that's one of the intents for that 40%. So you could go on and concentrate on teaching our kids.
When you have a level of uncertainty, whether or not, then it has an impact on staffing and everything else. So, and I've seen it, so I'm not telling you anything that I don't know. When there is uncertainty, it filters down and it permeates the system. And everyone feels that, and everyone wants to know that they have something that they can depend on, that they can stand on, that the initiatives that we've started, that we can actually see through. So I would, again, I feel that it's my responsibility as superintendent to offer some of this information so that as you're having your discussions, you see both sides of the issue. And certainly I don't want to, derail our discussion with all of the other topics that we have here, but I just feel responsible to talk about all of the things that, as a school system, that we have to consider.
Absolutely.
With that uncertainty noted, I would just ask if it'd be possible if we could consider a date by which we would make a decision on the funding formula. As we move forward and we're developing our budget, the school board's developing their budget, this uncertainty can really impact their ability to retain teachers in the future and budget for those positions.
Right.
I think setting a specified date that we know we'll either vote to move forward with our current formula or make changes would be very helpful to that process. And I'd encourage no later than the end of March.
Agree.
Well, we can do that. We'll do that. Let you know.
Mr. Mayor, I was going to suggest that perhaps because we're starting for the upcoming fiscal year, that not to look at trying to impact this year, this upcoming fiscal year, but perhaps looking at next year, since we're going to have a joint meeting in August, that it'll give us time and not rush through it trying to meet a deadline of May to June of this year. But that way we would really look at it. It may not change, but if it should, at some way tweaking or what have you, you'll have enough time to be able to bring something forward. Yeah, that's my suggestion. Yes, I don't think that would be fair to any of the city nor to the school board. No.
Okay, well, you all get in a few conversations. I'm fine with that. We can make that.
Yeah, I would not want. We've actually already provided the school with what we anticipate the formula will deliver based on the revenue projections that we currently have, and certainly would want to continue that for FY24. So yeah, absolutely.
I was going to add, and I know we got to move on, but if you look at the direct link between the city and the school system, and you look at what's going on in the city with gun violence, a good majority of our gun violence issues are stemming from our children. And I think what we are seeing right now is we're in a process, we've made investments, and that's what we're thankful for, that 40%. But I guess time is of the essence, and we're in a critical time, so we're like, what are we doing? But what I'm looking forward to seeing is with Rotec, with our CAO building, with the administration building that we have now, we're just looking to see that return on investment. So that way we'll see a greater impact. So I think if we all just continue to process this out and continue to have the necessary conversations, that return on investments, prayerfully, hopefully, we'll start seeing a difference in our community. So I just wanted to make sure that we're still working together. And I know there's some concerns with the city funding, but as long as, like you said, just piggybacking, we're making an investment in our children, not just teacher, staff, in our buildings, and our infrastructure, but we're making an investment for the betterment of our kids. And my child is a has direct impact from COVID. All right, so there is some development issues that we're having, but also we have incredible staff that are able to help with that. So I'm just looking forward to seeing the return on the investment that the city makes. All right.
I would like to make one point as well.
Yes, sir.
So I believe passionately that education is the great equalizer, and it can lift everyone up. And one of the things I'm so proud of our division is that we care about the whole child. Yes. And we're reaching the whole child academically and recognizing all the issues that they are faced with. And some of the things that I'm sure they'll mention in the capital improvement plan is our community engagement and empowerment center. Okay. So we're not just investing in the child academically, we're investing them in a holistic approach and their families. So we're doing a lot as a division to give the city the foundation it needs to bring everybody up. And then you add in Rotech and what we're doing to bring in workforce development and how that can improve the city. I just think education is something you cannot take away from somebody when you give them a good one. And I think I just love how much support we've had in the past, and I hope that continues forward. And I can't wait till you hear more about what Dr. White's going to talk about with our capital improvement plan as well. Yeah.
Well, thank you. And let me just say, as a council member that have been in your shoes on the school board, I understand perspective and the concerns you have, and we'll take all of that into consideration as we go forward. All right? Okay, we're going to move on from funding right now.
Well, sort of.
Yeah, you're right.
Sort of. Well, what I failed to mention earlier is that before you do have a copy of our strategic plan. The strategic plan was approved by the school board last spring, and much of what we're discussing here this morning, all of it, you'll find in our strategic plan. It is our way forward over the next 6 years, and so it will answer many of the questions that have been raised and a lot of the topics that we're going to cover. When it comes to our equity and action plan, which is embedded in our strategic plan, we're so excited.
Yes, we are.
We are so excited, and the community is excited. Now, we will talk to the school board tomorrow night. We have a work session on our actual facility, where we have a few delays when it comes to our facility, but we will not have a delay when it comes to our programming. So we are really, really excited that it's happening. It's happening. Students are registering right now. Right now, right, Mr. Friedman? They are registering right now for classes for next year. And that means that, so when we talk about Rotech at Ruffner, and I know we're in the naming process right now, but the programming is on track, the programming is on schedule, where our kids will be able to have workforce development opportunities. And that part of it is absolutely on track. We are on track when it comes to streamlining our resources so that we are populating the administration on Campbell building. That's what we call the old Roanoke Times building, so that we're more efficient in our services. But we're really also excited about our community empowerment center. That will be kind of the third rung of that, where we'll be able to offer a welcome center for our families, have GED programs for our families as well, a parent and guardian university. So we're, again, wrapping our arms around not only our students, but our families. And so we couldn't be more excited about that. So our programming is absolutely on schedule, even if our facility might be a little bit delayed, but our programming is definitely on track. So with that, that brings us to, and we put this part of the funding, and you'll see this in the next slide. I keep forgetting that I have the clicker. We wanted to talk about the fund balance because it is related to our capital plan. So I'm going to ask Mrs. Jackson if she'll come back up, followed by Mr. Perkins, who will take you where we are with our capital plan overall.
Thank you very much, Dr. White. Again, yes, so a lot of you have provided an excellent segue into this part of the kind of funding pie. And one thing that I'm very proud of that we have done, particularly over the last couple of years, is really, and it was at the the recommendation of council and the city manager that we look at our fund balance and make sure that we're strategically using those funds to help us with maintaining our school buildings and work towards relying less on debt over time. I know we have a long-standing agreement that $5 million of the city's debt service is allocated towards school projects each year. From time to time, we have asked if there was room within the debt limits for us to borrow more than that. We're in a year of that right now, in fact, so that we can replace Preston Park Elementary. But in general, I know that is something that is of interest to city management and city council to kind of fit our projects together with city projects and make sure that all of that fits together looking longer term in terms of what those debt limits are and that sort of thing. So we've done that by creating a capital project fund a year ago and have leveraged some of those funds. And so you see that on the slide that at the year end 2021, we did not have funds in that fund. We created it during that year and have moved $23 million of our fund balance into that fund, which honestly, as I just said before, the intent was to, over time, rely less on borrowing for some of our capital improvement needs, but it's really been serendipitous that we've made this move right now, given the challenges with inflation and with supply chain challenges and finding staffing for our construction and contracting areas that has really raised the price. I'm sure that the other city departments have experienced that as well. So this has really helped us with being able to continue to move forward with some of our projects that Dr. White just mentioned, to be able to use that unassigned fund balance and assign it towards capital project needs. So I won't belabor the point. I know you all understand the need for reserve beyond our capital fund. Of course, we use those funds for stabilization reserve, helping us with cash flows throughout the year and guarding against any unforeseen issues, which we all experienced that. Fortunately, it wasn't as bad as we anticipated, but when COVID hit and we were so unsure of what that was going to do to sales tax and that sort of thing, to just give you a sense of how we're using those funds. So unless there are questions particularly related to that, I'll hand it over to Mr. Perkins to continue talking about capital.
So good morning. Good morning. So what I'd like to do is kind of walk you through our second year of a complete revamp of how we handle our capital improvement plan. And as you recall, in an August 2021 joint meeting just as this, then Councilman Bestpitch recommended that we look into a 10-year capital improvement plan. And we did just that. However, we went a step further. We wanted to apply at the direction of the superintendent an equity lens to how we prioritize our capital improvements. And so what I want to do is walk you through the cycle that you see on the screen, and there are some handouts in your packets that I will not cover, but I'll allude to. So first, starting at the top block, which is the blue block superintendent. Our superintendent lays out the directive and the direction for the district through the strategic plan and the mission for the school district. From there, it goes to, and reason finance and operations overlaps is because we have to work closely in determining the funding availability, considering what the agreement with the city and how the projects are existing. As for an example, we have to go through the work orders. Do we have a roof that needs replacing? The average age of the building assets that the city has and the school board cares for is about 57 years. That ranges from 116 years to approximately 1 year at Fallon Park Elementary. And so and I will say that's a testament to preventative maintenance, correct? Well, 116-year-old building that we can still occupy. So from there, we lay out the projects that are needed review, and we turn that over to our courageous leadership team, which is part of the equity task force. That team takes the projects and looks through those projects, and they use what's called equity indicators. And in your packets, there's an example of the equity scorecard that we use, and that allows us to prioritize the projects based on the level and the score that they receive in going through their prioritization. And that allows us to ensure that all of our students have the opportunity to be successful within the school buildings themselves, because as you know, without a safe, clean, and healthy environment, education will suffer. From that point, we then present to the school board the recommendations based on what the equity task force and how they have prioritized the projects. Then the school board reviews that presentation and those projects, and then there's an approval process for the school board. From there, our finance department shares that information with the city budgeting department, and the city budgeting department puts together the budget book, which then comes to you, city council, for final approval of the capital improvement plan, and works in conjunction with your capital improvements and those for the school. Now, that is an overview. Quickly, some of the items that fall into capital improvement, because there's always discussion about, is it preventative maintenance or capital maintenance compared to capital improvement. Generally, you will find fixed assets, meaning the buildings themselves, HVAC systems because they're very expensive, playgrounds. Playgrounds cost about $290,000 to completely replace a playground. Athletics fields and courts and all of those, paving and roofing, those are generally things that you find in the capital improvement plan. Now, with that overview, I will stop and pause, and myself and Dr. White and Ms. Jackson will answer any questions that you may have.
Mayor, if I can add just...
Mr. Carroll.
Sorry, my microphone is pretty quiet, so I'll speak up as much as I can. So I just want to add that this has been one of the long-standing benefits of the formula, is that the dollars that are available for the city, or for the schools, to service the debt necessary associated with their capital and to build that reserve fund has been an essential part of being able to advance on their capital projects. The significance of that is one of the files that I gave you all is, of course, the school for some time has been responsible for that annual debt service, but whatever debt that they actually incur does count against one of our debt policies, and so that was part of the reason to shift to more cash-funded projects with the fund balance, which the fund balance allowed as well. One distinction, because of course you all know we talk about fund balance ourselves and unrestricted, and there is some difference between the two. The schools are fortunate to be able to actually use those dollars to be able to build a capital fund and make these investments. We, of course, are not. Our dollars are there genuinely for catastrophic occurrences and really to actually maintain our debt, our credit rating, which benefits all of us when we borrow funds as well. Also, the last thing I'll say too is over the last 2 years with the process that Mr. Perkins just laid out, the interaction between the two staffs on capital projects has been significantly stronger than perhaps it has been in the past. It's been good in the past, but it's even better now in that we are able to look ahead much easier than we were in the past to know what those improvements will be, coordinate a lot differently and a lot better. And if and when there is an investment that does require a significant amount of debt, we'll know much earlier and be able to account for that in our capital planning as well. So just wanted to throw those mixes in there as well. I think that this is one of those areas where some of the changes that have been made over the last couple of years have dramatically benefited both the school and the city as well. So, thank you.
Great. Mr. Mayor, if I could just add just a piece of information. It's just that we've also, as a school board, to build off Mr. Cowell's point, just this past year, modified our fund balance policy to ensure that it also reflects impacts of inflation and those sorts of things to continue our partnership and the strength of balancing out debt needs with what we have as fund balance. So I would just add that we've also increased our vigilance and attendingness as our relationship has matured around this capital improvement process.
Mr. Perkins, could you just highlight, I know you mentioned Fallon Park, 1 year? Has it just been 1 year?
1 year.
That's incredible. And the new Welcome Center. Could you highlight a couple of other priorities that are underway this year and that are coming up?
Yes, sir. We are expanding Breckenridge Middle School. As you know, Breckenridge, we have a mobile or excuse me, a learning cottage, but it's really a trailer out beside the school.
That's clever.
Yeah, that we utilize because that school is overpopulated. So we have a major renovation going on there. We also have a major renovation going on at Morningside Elementary School. Morningside Elementary School had two concerns. One, we had a detached preschool wing that was detached from the school, and we wanted to bring that into the inner security of the campus. And that campus is on a very small lot, and so we needed to maximize space on that campus because we needed a better bus loop, and we need to be better neighbors with the community there because parking and congestion right around the school can be very difficult. They are bearing with us through that renovation, but that's a major renovation that will ease some of that. We have started planning for Preston Park, which is over capacity. We really need to expand that school, and we're in the preliminary architectural reviews and processes for that. And then we, of course, have the Road Tech at Ruffner project. We also have the administration on Campbell Avenue project, and we've started our process for the Community Empowerment and Education Center.
Thank you.
Mr. Perkins, I just have a quick question. Who does the CIP matrix? Is that your team, and then it goes to school board, or do they have input as well?
So this is a team that's set up by the school board, the Equity Task Force. There's a subcommittee of that, and that subcommittee is, we refer to that as a Courageous Leadership Subcommittee. That team it takes the projects that we bring and the potential budget. And remember, this is a rolling cycle. It's a 10-year cycle, but it's reviewed annually because it's very fluid.
Sure.
And so they will apply then the scorecard that you have in your packet in front of you. They'll come up with a number that will help us prioritize that.
Oh,
and then that's presented to the school board.
Okay, I was wondering what that process was. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Just I have a quick question on if we get an update on what's going on with the school buses. I know that if we were to buy them back, that would be a big funding issue. Mm-hmm. But I know that you guys are in the process of making decisions, and just wanted to see where we are on that.
So school buses in particular, we are waitlisted to go electric with school buses. I'll start with that because I know that is one of the things you're very interested in. We were waitlisted along with Roanoke County and Salem because our initiative to go green, just like the city, is very important. Those buses that we have now, we have approximately 175 buses in the fleet, and we are working through with our partners at Durham for that process. And tomorrow night we will share with school board some information related to that.
If I may, I know there's other questions, I'm sorry, just to add, I feel like we should add collectively with this is the school board is also engaged in a feasibility study for boundary adjustment, because that puts pressure on transportation, it puts pressure on our capital improvements. We're engaged in what probably will now be a full 12-month process, but by the end of the following school year, in all likelihood, we're hoping to see a different configuration to reflect the current populations in our schools. So I would just mention that that's also going on.
Yes. With the electric school buses, will they be owned by Durham or would they be owned by Roanoke City?
So
schools?
That will be Durham's buses. However, they can't leave the state of Virginia if we receive them. And so if there's any changes, then they would come to us, Roanoke City Public Schools.
All right, hold on a minute. I got some hands in the back. Ms. Sanchez.
Mr. Perkins, you mentioned that Breckenridge is overcrowded. And are there any plans to build another high school or enlarge, for example, Fleming, which is overcrowded?
So as Dr. Jameson mentioned, that is part of our feasibility study. And in that feasibility study, it would be our capacity to handle such and how that would be planned out. We hope that will bring us some good insight for that. But I can tell you that based on our assessment at this point for our fixed assets being the high schools, they are at capacity.
Thank you.
I would also mention we have city representatives on our feasibility. We have planners from the city helping us. So.
Luke has a question.
I have two questions kind of going dual on the two conversations we're having consecutively right now. On the electric buses, how has our eligibility for funding been influenced by the fact that we don't own the buses directly for federal and state funds? And then on the boundary study, To put rather bluntly, how has it become more difficult with all of the new housing projects that are being approved by City Council? The largest one that was just approved off of Orange Avenue, is that being taken into account, and where do we see needs in the school system because of that?
Yes, sir. So I'll start with the first question. Yes, there are some grants and opportunities that are impeded by the fact that we outsource. However, most of the federal opportunities do allow us, which is why we are on the wait list for that federal, and that's where most of the money comes from. And so we work with our partners at Durham through some of those, but they also have a green initiative also, and we are asking them to pick up the pace on that as we are going solar and doing some EV chargers and such with our own fleet and our own assets with solar panels. The second question is, can you repeat what the question was, sir?
How have we made it more difficult to redistrict because of the boundaries with the new projects that are being approved?
So,
while still years out, and this process only happens so often.
So the good thing is we have a city planner that's part of that team for the feasibility study, and they will provide that insight. We also use Weldon Cooper for a lot of the research. And we have in our English language learner services, we've got a lot of projections for the increase in students in that way. We don't anticipate that it is going to have a drastic impact. However, as I just said, our high schools are at capacity, and we do need to consider that. But the good thing is we've invested in a lot of our facilities around the district. Rams would be a prime example where we can expand, and we do have room in Roanoke Academy for expansion, and we have room in some of our other elementary schools as well. But that is, we have to work with the academic side to make sure that we're providing the best opportunity in addressing the equity issues, and we have to work through the feasibility study to make sure that we get the best and to see that we have the capacity to handle that as a district.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions, anybody?
I don't, looks no.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Perkins.
So don't go anywhere. Because the next item is our use of facilities and the facility use agreement. And so we would like to take you through that to answer your questions that you've raised for us. So, Mr. Perkins, it's you again. There we go.
Okay, so hello again. That wasn't long. So there are two primary ways to access the facilities that are your assets and our possession, and that is, one, we have a school board policy on how we access school facilities, and two, we have a joint use agreement with City Parks and Recreation. Between those two, there is a priority of facilities that we have laid out, and that is, of course, our school activities, our school athletics, our school fine arts will take priority, and then second is our City Parks and Rec Department, and then third is our outside groups, and I won't bore you with that. The reason I added this chart, and I know it's small to see, but I want to illustrate that 1,709 days of usage has occurred in our schools. Myself and Michael Clark have worked a lot this year. We've had, some issues with some of the use of our facilities, but the good thing is we're on the same page, and we work very closely in how we handle those issues that have come up. A lot of those are handled by state code. We can't allow people to have access to our children if they have barrier crimes, and the way to identify that is through badges, and that's a lot of the problems that have popped up in reference to our facilities. But we have a lot of partnerships and a lot of groups that use our schools. Everything from the YMCA, that's probably the largest user with their after-school programming and summer school activities. Parks and Recreation is our second largest user. We have a number of sports clubs outside of Parks and Rec clubs, colleges and universities. The Roanoke Symphony has a standing use of our facilities. The Potters Guild, community groups, faith-based organizations, and many more. Myself and Michael Michael, you're Director of Parks and Rec here in the back. We talk on a regular basis about our Parks and Rec programming because we want to make sure that our kids have access. It's also important it's a pipeline for our high school athletics. And if our youngest are really engaged in doing things, then our high school athletics are much more competitive. And I don't know about y'all, but I like to win. And so when William Fleming and Patrick Henry are doing well, then we all, we're on the map. So, and I'll take any questions in reference to this.
Any questions?
Yeah, I just have one question. Mr. Perkins, I'm glad you alluded to the badges and that incident, because at the time I thought Mr. Cherry was my school board buddy. Turns out it's actually Mr. Cathy, so he does not does not have any information on that. But I did talk to a couple people who had problems with the badges. It seemed to escalated. I saw some emails, and I don't know that that was actually the way that it should be handled. I think we probably need to sit that particular group down and have some discussions about what should and should not be allowed. So is there any way we can resolve that one particular issue that we have going? I don't know if Mr. Cherry has told you about, I'm sure you have, and I'm sure Mr. Clark knows about it. But sometimes it's easier just to sit people down and have a discussion about what is and is not allowed, because I think at this point it's gotten out of hand.
Well, we have done that.
You have? You've sat down with them?
Through email, and we had a meeting, an in-person meeting that I required, because you can only communicate so much by phone or by email or by text.
Correct.
And so we had an in-person meeting with all of the athletic directors around the city that Mr. Clark set up for us. And we talked about the rules, and then within 3 days of that meeting, remember, we've been working on this issue since November.
Sure.
And we've been very lenient as a division, and it is a safety issue. If the badge is a symbol that they passed their background check and they don't have a barrier crime, which would prevent them from working with children. And barrier crimes are very important, and we also have had issues about the condition of our facility and how they're being left. So it's adults that need to take responsibility, and we're willing to talk, but at this point we got to a point where we had to hold someone accountable for their actions. We're not going to have employees disrespected, and we set the expectation. We encouraged the expectation from November to the in-person meeting to do it again, and then Mr. Clark has sent out a very lengthy email defining the rules once again, and in this case, I see that issue as being closed, and we will move forward from there.
So it has been resolved, because I have not heard anything since Friday.
Well, it's been resolved from
on your perspective.
Because we've addressed it. We've given all the leniency that I'm in the position to continue.
Yeah, people have the proclivity to call council because that's just what they know, and I redirected them to school board because I thought this is something with the schools, and probably because Parks and Recs were involved, I probably could have done something differently with our city manager. But I just wanted it to be resolved because they were saying that they were not being treated equitably, and that it was because they were black, and when you hear things like that, it's very disappointing, because that's probably not true, but there's been some misunderstanding somewhere, and I'm glad that you all took the time to try to resolve their concerns. I'm not sure that they're resolved yet, no.
No,
okay.
and it is a Parks and Rec requirement to have that barrier check, so we're enforcing the rule that they have in place through our spot checks, because we share the spot checks of the facilities with Parks and Rec due to their staffing shortages.
Okay, well, I will redirect them to either Mr. Clark or to you, because there's certainly nothing I'd
be happy to talk with anyone.
Okay.
And that barrier crimes requirement is part of something under state code that neither the city council nor school board has really any influence over directly, and currently the political climate of General Assembly does not wish to visit.
Yeah.
Mr. Perkins and Mr. Clark, I'm going to put you on the spot. Come on up. I know with the challenges we faced, particularly with COVID and some of these extra safety and security measures, those are all absolutely critical. What do you guys see as opportunities for growth in terms of this collaborative use of facilities? I know you've identified some of the challenges, but what do you see in your regular conversations as some opportunities for growth?
Okay. We can jump in, because I know we've had talks, and the superintendent has actually had talks with Mr. Clark too, about how we can expand opportunities for children, getting back to that pipeline of having successful high school teams. So I'll let Mr. Clark go.
So I think some of the benefits of moving to a centralized scheduling of facilities has certainly been beneficial for us. It gives a single point of contact for our staff to work with them. And then they get that info back down to individual building managers to let us in to those facilities. We're trying to collect contact information for all of our participants. The way that we are set up to administer youth sports, we don't get all of that information because of our rec clubs collect registrations, so they get all the contact info, they take all the fees, and then they pass along just very basic rosters to us so we know how many children are on each team. What we don't always get is contact information. So I've tried to collect as much of that as possible so that we can communicate directly with parents. And that's what the email that Mr. Perkins referenced earlier was what I sent out to as many as I had. I had around 450 emails. Still wasn't all of our participants, but I think us being able to communicate directly with parents to explain what the expectations are, because oftentimes that message is lost between folks. So if I tell you and then you tell her and then she tells him, a lot of times the message changes by the time it gets all the way down to the parents. Right. So I think the biggest opportunity for growth is just direct communication. So everybody knows that badge is required. Doors can't be propped open. No food or drink in the gym. If you make a mess, clean it up. I mean, these are all basic things that we all should be doing, in order to use the facilities. The fact of the matter is we don't have enough facilities to facilitate all of our programs. Between all of the activities that the schools have going on, all of the activities that we have going on, there's only so much time and space to go around. We've mentioned aging facilities. When these schools were built, they were built to accommodate the activities at the time. Right. Those activities have grown, the buildings haven't. Same with our rec centers, elementary schools, everything else. So the good thing about their capital planning is that we're involved on the early end with that. So if there is opportunity for recreational or community use in that facility, we can have that discussion on the front end as opposed to being an afterthought after it's built. So I think continuing that will help us as well.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Preston Park's going to be a prime example of how we're going to work with Parks and Rec to increase potentially the gym, and because that's a large footprint that property is, so we have some other opportunities there as well.
Great, thank you.
Well, thank you. And I do want to, while we're on this subject, I do want to commend Dr. Pike for working with us with some football teams that needed to have a practice field, and they schedule their practices at night, or at least during that part of the year when it gets dark, 5 or 6 o'clock. And I appreciate, and we all appreciate you stepping forward. And you used that exact term that our kids, they're playing, they're our kids, and they're going to be eventually moving on to the high school. So that's important. So thank you for that instance that comes up that we have from time to time. People will call council and say, hey, can you help us on that?
I understand.
So thank you for your assistance and work on that.
No, and thank you, and thank you for your support of that type of programming again. And thanks to Mr. Clark as well for working with us and for meeting with me. We were talking about athletic programs for young people. If you'll recall, this past summer we had a Staying Safe by Staying Connected program where we hosted athletic programs for our middle school students, taught by our high school students many times, and many of the coaches too. So we were really proud of that and wanted to make sure that we were partnering and not competing. So the next item that you have is you wanted to have information on student performance measures. And let me pause here for a second, because for this you've asked about a shared agreement between the school board and the city council and whether there's an agreement of how outcomes are measured. And so the answer is yes and yes. And so in front of you, again, you have our strategic plan. This is not just an agreement between the city council and the school board. This is a community agreement. There were representatives from every aspect of the community: parents, teachers, students, administrators, neighborhood leads and leaders, higher education partners, and city council and school board members were represented on the work group that developed the strategic plan. And in your strategic plan, you'll see the specific kind of targets and measures. So these are targets and what we're expecting. It's not a mystery. It shouldn't be a mystery to anyone, because we've laid those out, not just between the school board and the city council, but as a community
We said, what are we looking for? And so for more information on this, I'm going to ask our Chief Academic Officer, Mr. Archie Freeman, if he would come forward and start out by talking about what we determine success, how we determine success and what it looks like for us. Mr. Freeman?
Thank you, Dr. White. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Just a few things to add, and I thank Dr. White for already setting the groundwork about how do we measure success. And in your strategic plan there in front of you, you will see a couple of the bullets, and it's here on the screen. You will also see it. We have some things that are in place. We know that early literacy is important and that we must have our students reading on grade level by the end of 3rd grade. It is pathway number 1 in the strategic plan that you have today. And then you will notice that we have our second, third, and fourth bullet talks about the Virginia Department of Education. As you know, our standards are aligned with the Virginia Department of Education standards. We must meet benchmark proficiency in reading, which got to be 75%, and math got to be 70%. We also got to work on increasing our graduation rate, and we must also improve access to our advanced courses in our career and technical education. So as you notice, career and technical education, we've already discussed it a lot today in our equity and action plan, so I won't belabor that point. But I want to talk a little bit about something that Mrs. Apel already started. We got to concentrate on the whole child. It is very important, and Mr. Cherry has also mentioned it too. We got to meet the needs, not only academically, but socially and emotionally. And so when we look at our information for today, the Virginia Department of Education has a set of accountability measures. As I mentioned earlier, we have to look at our SOL data and the proficiency in math, English, and science. Science, the proficiency has to be at 70% also. When we look at our graduation completion index, is how many students are graduating. They can graduate with a diploma, being advanced or standard, a certificate of completion, or a GED, and we have to be at accumulated points of 88. So also you will see that our college career and civic readiness index, which is a new component for our accreditation standards this year. I'm proud to say that last year we implemented and piloted in our spring semester through our government classes. And some of you might have participated in speaking to the government classes. But this year we took it to another level, and I'm extremely proud of the social studies supervisor, Mr. Jagodinsky, who has worked with our teachers, our principals, and also our community, because they had to do community-based and work-based learning, meaning they've been out assisting in the park area in some cleaning projects. They also visited our schools, and you'll see the picture in the bottom right-hand corner just recently in the last week where they visited Hurt Park and they were reading. They're visiting different schools, Hurt Park, Round Hill. They've already visited 14 different sites in order to assist our students. And our chronic absenteeism, as we know, students have to be in school. We got to remove all the barriers for our students to be there. So when students are in school, and I want to give you an example, you're chronically absent if you miss 10% of your enrollment start date. So if I've been in school 90 days, if I miss 9 days, I'm now considered a chronically absent student. So we do everything that we can in order to keep our students in school. Yes, there are some times that we must make sure that we have to give consequences regarding the discipline, but we do address it to make sure that we have things in place as that student support piece when students come back to school. There are a lot of things that are taking place to address chronic absenteeism, and I'm sure that Councilwoman Vivian Sanchez-Jones can agree. There are student support meetings that involve the principal, the teachers, the counselors, the student support specialists to address what is going on at the school, what is going on in the house, and what we can do to provide those wraparound services so they can be successful academically. Then we have to look at our dropout rate. We got to continuously work on our dropout rate. The state has put us at it must have 6% or less to be considered to make sure you're addressing your dropout rate. And we are constantly making sure that we address the needs of our students, making sure we're providing the alternative programs, the alternative settings, what we can do with credit recovery, because we want to make sure we have all our students in school. So as we continue to look at accountability measures and performance measures, you will hear the teachers talk that we test students all the time. We hear that quite frequently. But some of those tests are mandated tests that we have from the state that we must complete, and then we must see where our students are at and take them to the next level. So you will notice that in this slide, we have our phonological awareness for literacy screening, which is our PALS, which is a screener that requires pre-K through 2. for key components of literacy and phonological development that take place at least twice a year, once at the beginning and one at the end. And sometimes students in third grade that are new to Virginia have to be tested also, so we know exactly where they're at with our state assessments. Measures of academic performance, our MAP assessment. This assessment is given 3 times a year in grades K through 12, and it's measuring academic achievement, where it tells us where our students are at right now, where we can make sure we can take them in their learning for mathematics and reading and address their needs. This is how we tailor our instruction in the classroom and also in our written curriculum if we need to make mid-course corrections and make some adjustments. And then we have our growth assessments, and we're actually in that testing window right now. What's required by the Virginia Department of Education and by the Virginia Code. This assessment is given grade level content throughout the year to determine growth in grades 3 through 8 in the areas of reading and math. We have to look at our subgroup information while we're looking at this testing so we can adjust instruction as needed, whether it's remediation and tutorials during the day, whether it's after school programs, and we even have some Saturday components in place. So when we look at our SOL data, I mentioned earlier about the math, science, and math, science, and English. And then we have our own district benchmarks and snapshots. The old word for that, for all of us, quizzes. Thinking I can say that, quizzes, meaning that teachers are having their own self-made quizzes too, to address learning during the week, to see what they've taught, what needs to be remediated, so immediate results. But we also have our own instructional supervisors that create district-wide assessments that are formative and summative, developed by instructional supervisors and classroom teachers, utilizes to monitor the progress and again, modify instruction. It's very important that we constantly look at data to address our students' needs. Now, of course, accountability is very important. So the accountability starts with all of us, and I say all of us. We have what we call progress monitoring. Progress monitoring involves instructional rounds, academic desk reviews, trainings, but I want to talk a little bit about instructional review rounds and academic desk reviews. It's very important because it is mandated by the state that we must complete academic reviews. So I want to walk you through the course of what has taken place over the first semester and was getting ready to take place for the second round. First semester, the instructional supervisors, my department, we all worked together with our principals, with our teachers to visit 21 of our schools. We went through classroom observations. We spent time, 2.5 hours at each site, visiting classes, talking with students, interacting, observing the instruction, making sure the lesson plans aligned, and then we come back to the table and we discuss it and debrief with the principal. Then we come back to our central office and then we debrief. What do we see was going well? What do we see as areas of improvement? What do we see we're at right now, and how do we need to channel our resources? It was very powerful. We had some things we knew we had to work on to assist some schools, and at the end of the month, which I invite everyone, we will have a student achievement update presented to our school board on February the 28th. You're more than welcome to come, or you may view it because we will have our testing results updated by then, but we'll be able to walk more through this process so everybody can see exactly what took place and why we channeled resources in different areas. But after the actual instructional round reviews and the desk reviews, the principal come in. When the principals come in, we have a conversation in regards to what we saw, the areas of improvement, and then we have, as given to us by the Virginia Department of Education, an academic toolkit. Yes, the toolkit probably was 47 pages long, and there's a lot of standards that some schools may have had all 7 standards that included social and emotional piece, that included an attendance piece, and some may not have had that. Of course, the high schools had the piece dealing with chronic absenteeism and also graduation rate, but certain components had to be completed, certain questions on what else is going on inside the school that we know is taking place as documentation for us to present to the state. So it's a lot of time spent in order to see where we're at and hold not only ourselves accountable, but holding our teachers, our students accountable, and holding our parents accountable. It is all in. We know we have the thing, we are one. We have to make sure we continue to work together. So then we have our trainings, because we want to make sure, as Councilman Pretty mentioned earlier, about retention of our staff. In order to retain, we must provide professional development. And professional development and training, as you will see on this slide, this is where principals and teachers are working together, and administrators, not only during the summer, but sometimes during after school, with our grant called E3+, which is empowering educators to excel. Opportunities to look at a problem of practice, opportunity to see exactly what's happening in the school, look at the data, look at your instructional strategies, work collaboratively to address it, and look at other strategies to put in place and work with students. And it is working. We are excited about that. And then we have mandatory trainings. Of course, we have to complete by the Virginia Department of Education. It usually takes an hour, hour and a half, every 2 or 3 weeks, sometimes once a week. It depends on what the trainings may be. And then we provide professional development to our teachers and our principals on things that we see are happening that we need to address. And we want to make sure we're looking at the needs, like maybe a classroom management issue with some of our brand new teachers. We want to make sure we provide that professional development and training. And as additional support for our students, I'm glad to say that we have a lot of things taking place with 21st Century. It's in 9 of our schools, 8 elementaries and 1 middle school. We have small group remediation that takes place during the day and then after school. And then we also have, as I mentioned earlier, social and emotional supports that is surrounded for all of our students, as well as our faculty and staff, as we address each and every one's concerns in education. With that, I will take any questions with Dr. White.
What, anybody? Mr. Pretty?
The College Career and Civic Readiness Index, you said that is new. I'm not familiar with that. Could you speak more to it? What does it cover? What exactly is it measuring for?
It's measuring for work-based learning and service learning. It is a component that was added just this year. Mm-hmm. And so what we did is, in order to make sure that it was put in the curriculum that our students would have a chance to do it during the school day as part of it, we took it and put it in our government classes. Mm-hmm. So all the government teachers have worked very well collaboratively with our instructional supervisors to make sure we have those components in place, so the students have to worry about getting it out after school, and we could monitor it and make sure it was implemented and implemented effectively.
This might be a question that's more appropriate for Alan on a different front. Is this something, the civic readiness, something that's been integrated into the updated history standards that are being considered by the state right now? Particularly focused on the civic readiness portion of this.
At present, the history standards are still a major work in progress, and so no, different divisions are looking at the college career readiness indicator different ways. Some are doing it through WISE financial literacy proficiency. Some are doing it through their government classes. So it really is a requirement, but it's thankfully one where there's been some local control over how to address it.
Okay, so it's separate from the government.
It's more the accountability accreditation piece.
And focus on maybe some kind of equity lens at outcomes.
Again, this is the first year it's been in place, and I also fully expect that assessment and accountability will come under the review again in the very near future.
Save more questions for next year.
All right. Mr. Boss.
I was just wondering, during COVID, we had a lot of learning loss that happened. I wanted to just get an update as to where we are and getting back to where we were before COVID.
Well, I will just say this. Some of the information we're going to share with the board on February the 28th, we did share in our previous board meetings back in the fall, where we saw some growth in the area for those students that are attending our RCPS program. We want to make sure we continue to have that, as you all mentioned, with funding. We want to continue to have that program available, and we're actually on the way with working on RCPS Plus right now for this summer and preparing a great curriculum, but we have to wait and address it with the data that we receive.
And I'll just jump in there as well. I mean, what we know preliminarily is what we've expected, and that's our early learners. Again, if you take a 7-year-old today, that 7-year-old at 5, that's when COVID hit, right? And so then missed the in-person instruction as well as the in-person social emotional supports. And so when we look at deficits, and keep in mind that a lot of times, we're talking about some of the deficits that may have existed even prior to COVID, that were exacerbated by COVID because of isolation. And we know that that isolation was critical at the time because we were all uncertain. But at the same time, we have some work to do. So it looks like our early learners, that's where we still need to do more work. But we do have good news in other places, and we'll be able to share that more comprehensively with our school board.
Thank you. I don't know, Dr. White or Mr. Freeman, I just wondered what last year's, I can't remember, you probably told us what our graduation rate was last year. And also, are we at the 6% or less dropout rate required by state?
So graduation rate last year was at 87%, and we are a little bit above. We actually have some work to do in dropout rate to be at the 6%. But right now, as of this morning, from last year, it was 11.2.
11.2, okay.
Yes. And I failed to mention as part of the information, I know that was one of the questions, I believe, that this information for every school is accessible to the Virginia Department of Education. We have a school quality profile. So if you go and click on Roanoke City and click on any school, you can see all the data for each individual school too, as well as we're working on a dashboard that can be more friendly for our parents here.
And I'll just piggyback on that in terms of the dashboard. We've been, we're close. We're going to bring progress to our school board very soon. But I think it's so important for us to have transparency in these, not only the measures, but also how our schools are doing. And so we've been building this internal-facing and external-facing dashboard where parents will be able to go in and see that, how is my school doing? How is my school faring in terms of even suspension rate or the dropout rate? I believe that our parents deserve the right to be able to do that. So we're building that. That'll be coming soon this spring, and so we're really looking forward to that. And I'm just so proud of the staff that's a lot of information to populate, and it's a lot to be able to build that type of infrastructure and that system. But we're doing it. And we'll be able to have that, again, to take the mystery out of student performance for our parents who believe that that's critically important.
All right, I just want to remind council, be aware of the time now. All right.
I have 2 questions now.
Ms. Moon says she only
have one. I started one.
All right, Ms. Moon.
Mine deals with the dropout rate, but more so along with truancy for homeless. As you know, I had received an email from a young lady who asked the question after attending 2 of the AVID classes that I thoroughly enjoyed speaking at, and it was what type of services were available for teens who were homeless. And I guess, and for me, that would be, how do you track homeless? Those that are sleeping on someone's sofa or sleeping outside. And I believe when truancy, they are out of school for 45 days before they are actually noticed or considered absent. So if you could speak a little bit to that, I would appreciate it.
We are very much in tune to our students and their living conditions and where they are. And it's not just homelessness that can be very challenging, but also when students are in various kind of domicile arrangements and are having to. So we do have staff specifically designated to making sure that we know where students are, what they need, and bringing them in closer and then providing those kind of services for them, those wraparound services. Did you want to add anything?
Yes, ma'am. I want to talk about the truancy piece.
Okay.
So we have a process in place in which at the 5 days, the notification goes out, then 7 days, the second notification, and then the student support specialist, Ms. Vivian Sanchez, Jones sitting behind you, usually already in that process. They've already called, they're going out making home visits, but then they sit down at the table with the actual team, and those are the team members I mentioned earlier. So we don't get the 45 days, because we get the 45 days, we have a serious issue, not only just attendance, but instruction-wise too. And we also have to address the point that even with the attendance piece and the state does count this in there. Anytime a student has to receive OSS out of school time. So we have to make sure we address that too and put measures in place when they return back to school. So that is addressed. And then Mrs. White mentioned, Dr. White, excuse me, already stated about our homeless program. We have a lot of students, and Melora Horn is the coordinator of the program. She's very in tune. If we find out somebody is definitely homeless, we're working with them not only through that, we also work with them with transportation, making sure they can get and stay in the school, because they may have to go to a different school. We don't want to do that. We try to make sure we can keep them there, to keep something consistent for them. And we work with the building principal. Everyone else in the school is not knowledgeable of it, but the building principal can be very knowledgeable to assist as the information they cannot share. But we want to make sure we address their needs, make sure they got what they need, food and clothing. So there's a lot of options there. And I know sometimes they don't feel comfortable in sharing, but once they find that one they got the relationship with at the school they shared, we work behind the scenes.
So if the child that is homeless or someone knows of a student that is, they can contact who again? I know you say building principal.
They can contact the building principal, the school council, who they feel like they're comfortable with and telling in the building. But they can also contact directly Melora Horn, or they can contact me. I will be glad to get
I just wanted to put that out, from not just for here in the meeting, but just out to the public. For those that are listening or who know of, since that was posed to us, that they were interested in knowing what type of services was available. Thank you.
McKinney Vento program, they're just doing a lot of wonderful things, and we also, accept donations to that program. So put that plug in there.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to say something, clarify something for Ms. Moon. Sometimes the students don't want to be found. They go from place to place, and it's hard to find them, As a student support specialist, I spend a lot of time visiting homes and trying to play detective. So, have you seen this kid here, or through their friends? But sometimes the students themselves do not want to be found. But once they're found, there's plenty of services for them.
That's right.
And now, I do have a question.
Okay.
I don't know if the school board has considered coming up with a policy for cell phone use in the classroom.
So I know that some time ago, before my time, that there was a cell phone policy. I don't know if it was a policy, but it was a practice, where cell phones were placed in, I don't want to say little.
They were bags.
The pouches, right. Because that was the movement at the time where, in order to avoid those kinds of distractions in the classroom. It's my understanding then that was a bit challenging. Also, when we had our safety summit and when we had our safety discussions with parents, it's a very challenging discussion because we do want to limit the distractions, and we want teachers to be able to have access to their instruction and for kids to be available for instruction without the distraction of the cell phone. However, many parents told us during the safety summit and during that feedback that they wanted their students to have their cell phones with them and on them because they're, just in case of an emergency and those kinds of things. So we still have more work to do in terms of looking at that issue in particular. We did develop for this school year a cell phone promise where we've asked students to kind of have the face of their cell phone down. We're saying, face down, heads up. To put your cell phone kind of face down so that it's still with them, but we're asking kids to put their cell phones down and keep their heads up available for instruction. I can't tell you how well it's going because I know that realistically we are all pretty connected. If we took our cell phones right now, some of us might get the jitters, but I do think it is a topic worth revisiting because I know that our teachers want that type of uninterrupted time, and they deserve that, as well as our parents would want uninterrupted time for their students as well. But our parents also want their kids to have their cell phones next to them. So that's certainly something that we can continue to look at.
I understand the parents' point of view, but they also want their children to be learning.
Yes.
And
Thank you.
Yes,
Well,
thank you.
let me say that as a former school board member, I still get a copy of the VEA magazine.
Yeah.
It comes out, and the most recent copy that I got this weekend showed that there's a divide. It weighed the pros and the cons across the state on cell phone usage, and both sides had good arguments for it, so I can understand the decision or the decision-making process, because there's a really divide across the state on that.
Yes.
Some districts do that, some districts oppose it, and a lot of reasons that were mentioned. Parents, all of a sudden, wanted a way to get to contact their kids,
Yes.
and that was so important. So I think it's something as we go forward, but it's a divide across the state. Look at the board, I'd ask the board members to look at your recent copy of the VEA guideline. I'm still a member after all many years on the I'd say full board, so many years on the school board that I still get that VEA magazine. Go ahead, Ms. White.
Well, I wanted to take any other questions that you might have there and then ask if you wanted any time for a legislative update on legislative matters. So I know that our time is short.
We tried.
Well, is there
Is it the
any
council's-
anybody want any questions on our legislative update? We have our legislative chairman that's here.
I would just ask Alan if you give updates on the swatting legislation that I know is not officially part of the package, but has been an ongoing conversation.
Yes.
And then there was a legislative request regarding the securing of firearms. I think everything regarding funding came up during earlier conversation. And I will ask Alan to be brief, because I'd like to make a final request to this board. If we could allow Yolanda Joseph and Connor Sink to just provide final thoughts, because I know as a younger member of this board, to just be able to participate in this in any moment before we close out.
I just watched them both gulp.
That's why I gave them a warning so Alan could go first.
Mr. Mayor, Madam Chair, members of both just esteemed bodies, good morning. And real macro level, truly hundreds and hundreds of education bills come every year. And because this year has been an election year, both chambers, both parties have introduced even more than ever. There are some bill limits in some places, but it's been very, very busy. However, with the divided chambers, as what we call ourselves the VELs, the Virginia Education Legislative Liaisons, one of our mantras has been kind of just keep our powder dry, because we got crossover happening this week, and see what crosses over to each side. And we've certainly been advocating and talking and working, but just going really for your, so you have in your place the grip card, and again, teamwork between the council and the board is huge. Teamwork within the school division in each of the offices, and especially communications. On the back of that, there's a little QR code. We've created a white paper for every one of our positions to help be a resource as we walk the halls of the General Assembly and work with our elected officials. Our number one priority is always local control, but speaking specifically to safety and security that was brought up by Councilmember Pretty, we are working and advocating for Senator Boysko introduced a bill that involves requiring and raising expectations for families to secure weapons, and this is one that was already one of our priorities. We were able to click to that very quickly, and so we've been speaking on behalf of that. That goes directly back to the request we had from that the superintendent received from our parents. You know, it's like, okay, we're keeping kids accountable. Who's keeping the adults accountable? So we're working on that. Senator Deeds, and also there's a Republican House bill on the other side looking at the whole issue of swatting. You know, a lot of the laws about false alarms are about making a phone call, and that's not the way you're going to do it anymore. You actually don't even have to call 911 yourself. You can call the school and make a claim that the principal will dutifully report, which leads to a response. And people think about, oh, that whole day of instruction is lost. Not just that day of instruction is lost. It shakes the foundation of confidence. So we really want to see what's referred to as the swatting bills continue to advance, and those are things we're working very hard there. Again, we're advocating for compensation, support staff cap, teacher shortage. We've been working hard on a VRS bill that we helped work, that the Superintendent Association picked up, and that law enforcement has a very similar bill coming through, trying to help us get retirees back to do meaningful work. Assessment accountability is probably going to be left to the state board. Another exciting place for our work with our English language learners. Senator Suderline introduced a bill to create a work study, a little study to get divisions like Harrisonburg City Schools, Roanoke City Schools that serve large numbers of English learners, to look at the barriers. We have ratcheted up our apprenticeship programs and opportunities for children to get out in the workplace and the work field, earn income and earn credit, but there are special barriers there for English language learners. Specifically at school divisions, we can't ask about your residency status. Employers must. So what are the ways that we can do those types of things? So lots of pieces there, and of course the House and Senate budget's just coming out. And so those are the legislative pieces. There's also been some governance in the news from the state board in recent days, recent hours. So I'm prepared to speak to anything that you all are interested in that you feel you have time for. And of course, Superintendent White chairs the Region 6 Legislative Committee, and so and Mr. Cathy and Ms. Jameson, Dr. Jameson are on our Legislative Committee, and we've enjoyed working with you all for like the past 7 months on this package.
Thank you.
Just really briefly.
Okay.
Are there any, I know that we've seen a lot of bills coming in about trans students. Are there any things that we think are going to get through that we need to be worried about here in the city, or?
Councilmember Wilson, there's both a legislative piece where we really see the Senate being the hedge of protection and taking care of lots of things, but there's also the governance piece. It's been really interesting for me, having been a superintendent in my past career, where I worked for my school board versus at the state level, where the state superintendent does not work for the state board. The state superintendent works for the government as part of the administration. The whole Department of Education is an administrative agency, and what the State Board of Ed gets to do is pretty well defined in Constitution and code. So it is interesting. So in terms of the model policies that we saw come through, and again, the transgender model policy started with the Northam administration. Again, that went straight to the state superintendent, and they issued it. Then we saw this new one come out. So the public comment ended October 26th. There was over 70,000 comments. That led to a 30-day review period for comment, and that was supposed to end on November 26th. And since then, it's been entirely silent. I will tell you that in terms of that particular governance policy piece, our board and our superintendent have worked our equity policies in place. We feel really solid. We're working with the Virginia School Board Association, but superintendent's message has been that we can, this is not either or, this is an and, we can respect parents and protect children. And so I think there's a really long-standing commitment on that piece. The sexually explicit policy came through. Model policy has been a little bit of a challenge. Working hard on that. The instructional team working hard on how to make sure we provide the ample notice that are required there. But those are kind of in the governance track that are even separate from the legislative piece.
Thank you.
All right. Madam Chair?
This pretty made a request of our student representatives. If you want to restate your question for them as they come up.
Just either for them to share with us either something interesting, a challenge for us as a body, for something they'd like for us to address, or just one thought on one of the items that came up today that they'd like to share with us.
All right. Ms. Joseph.
Hello.
Pop quiz.
One thing that was interesting to me was when you guys were discussing the schools and the students and how important it is to pour into the students now. I agree 100% with that. The students that we have now are the students who are going to be in the workforces and who are going to be in the seats that you guys are in. And if you pour into them now, then they will grow and be able to propel us further than we are now. And I can agree with how school started when I'm still young, but like how when I entered school and how schools are now, like elementary school, it's a lot harder for them, especially with COVID, learning how to read and count. You didn't get that in the class, so it makes you fall behind. And so I appreciate all the work that you guys are putting in to getting the students back to where they can be. And I believe that the more you do this and the more time you take, the better it will be for them. And maybe one day I'll be able to come back and see new faces on here and students that will be thanking you guys for all the work that you've done, because I know I'm extremely grateful. And I really appreciated how both council and school board sees the students' best interest. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
You'll never hear the word equity more so than in a Roanoke City School Board meeting. These individuals, whom I've had the pleasure of working with over the past few months, are so focused on serving the student and the whole student, as has been mentioned previously in the meeting. So to honor Mr. Priddy's request, I would just like to ask the City Council, keep in mind Roanoke City Public Schools' goals of serving the student and the whole student equally and equitably every day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Mr. Mayor, that ends our report, and those are our babies.
Thank you. I'll turn the closing remarks over, and I began with Madam Chair.
Well, I will be brief. I just want to thank all of you for what felt like a very robust and good discussion today. Thank you for your time and your attention. As the mayor and I discussed last week, it's us. It's not you, us, and them. It's all of us. It's a we together, and we appreciate the opportunities to partner and move the city forward. I echo what was said by so many of us, that what we do on the school board is in the name of the future of our citizens, but of our city. And we appreciate all the commitment demonstrated today. And of course, aren't our student representatives the best? We cannot believe we have to replace them already. The process is beginning. So we are starting the process of recruiting our next round. So they've been real troopers as we figured out what to do with them productively. They are wonderful. So with that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. And let me thank all of you all that came this morning, and staff for the work you're doing. I think you're doing some outstanding work, and I appreciate that. And another word that you've heard mentioned, as the student stated, equity, you've heard partnership. Yes. And we got to maintain that. It's a partnership that we're in, and that's so important. And let me just say that, and it's a usual statement, but I like it, strong students, strong schools equates to a strong city.
That's right.
And that's why you all, and let it be known, that education is our #1 priority. So as we go through the things that we need to fill out, please remember that. Thank you all, and appreciate it, and keep doing the good work that you're doing. Thank you so much. That's it.
Thank you.
Have a good day, everyone.
Yeah.
Don't we actually have to adjourn the school board meeting?
We're going to stand in recess for our closed meeting.
And the school board is adjourned.
All right, in the essence of time, we need to reconvene, and these are some items that we need to consider for action. A communication from the mayor's office requesting that council convene in a closed meeting to discuss vacancies and on certain authorities, boards, commissions, and committees appointed by council pursuant to section 2.2-3711 Code of Virginia, 1950 as amended, and a list of current vacancies is included with the agenda for this meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Cobb.
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd.
Aye.
Mr. Velazquez.
Aye.
Ms. Moon Reynolds.
Aye.
Ms. Sanchez Jones.
Aye.
Mr. Pretty.
Aye.
And Mayor Lee.
Aye, and the motion passes. There's a communication from Council Member Patricia White Board, Chair of the City Council Personnel Committee, requesting that council convene in a closed meeting to discuss a personnel matter, being the mid-year performances of council-appointed officers pursuant to section 2.2-3711 Code of Virginia as amended. Need a motion?
So move.
Second.
All right, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Cobb.
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd.
Aye.
Mr. Volleson.
Aye.
Ms. Moon Reynolds.
Aye.
Ms. Sanchez Jones.
Aye.
Mr. Pretty.
Aye.
And Mayor Lee.
Aye, and the motion passes. Thank you. Are there any items listed on the 2 p.m. council docket requiring any discussion, clarification, and/or additions, deletion to the 2 p.m. agenda?
Mr. Mayor, may I, please? I would like to ask the city manager, if possible, if he could give us an update on the Northwest Hub. I know we received it in our weekly update, but I thought for the public's sake, if he could just share some information as to where that's, the progress is being made in that area.
And if I can do that under my comments?
Yes, sir. I just wanted to give you a heads up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're now down to the briefings, and I'm going to call on our city attorney, Mr. Tim Spencer, to introduce the briefing.
Yes, there are three basic areas of code amendments that we're looking at. I'm going to start with the first, in which I've worked with Councilmember Trish White Boyd on the EEAB in order to remove council members. I think she's done a wonderful job of getting this. She and Mr. Bestpitch of getting this organization, kind of giving it birth, if you will, and getting it up and running. I believe it's in a good, strong position that we can move forward and reduce the number of members from 9 to 7, thereby removing the city council members, and then also trying to clarify that there will be a non-voting member of staff assigned. This is similar to what's done in Planning Commission and BZA, and this non-voting member. And then the other thing that we look to do, which you'll see in the resolution attached, is when this organization was initially established, everyone was appointed for the same 3-year term, so they weren't staggered. And in order to establish staggered terms, we've got a resolution where we'll adopt that, as well as appointing Angie O'Brien as the non-voting city liaison. And that's for consideration, if you will. I answer any questions. They'll come up next council agenda for action, but it's before you today to take any input that you might have or questions.
All right.
Any questions? The next one that's dealing with the board and commission is one dealing with the Youth Athletics Review Board, and this was prompted by the city clerk's office asking to note that after the initial term of appointment, if reappointed, the term shall be for a 3-year term. So we went ahead and put that in there, and that's that house cleaning item, if you will. Any questions? Okay. One thing I'd like to raise this time, Not every council-appointed board is codified, and I didn't know, I thought this might be a good opportunity to raise the question if council believes that the clerk's office and our office should go through and evaluate whether you want to make all of those boards codified so that it's clear, and that way citizens can go to one place and see all the council-appointed boards, whether keep things as they are. I'm open to hear what council's thoughts might be on that.
Any comments, any thoughts? Lou?
It may not be appropriate for every board, but I think it'd be nice to go through it at least for each board and determine where it might be useful for us to have it codified and formalize what that relationship is, so we could also have a better understanding of what kind of items are we referring to those boards and what authority are we giving them to interact with us. Are they just something that faces the public, or are they really involved in our policy-making process on the local level?
And what I can do, Mayor, is then work with the clerk, come with the list, and we can do just a presentation to get further input. But by listing those boards and commissions that are appointed by council, I think that might give you a better idea of which ones you might wish to have codified and which ones you might say, nah, we're okay with leaving this as it is.
I agree with that.
Anyone in particular, Mr. Pretty?
The Parks and Recreation Advisory Board was corrected by a resolution many years ago, and there's no formal place that it exists in code, and their bylaws of course exist separate from it, but it might be nice to have when they come up with their bylaws amendments that they might have to come before the board for formal approval, and so there's a better understanding of what that board in particular does in relationship to this council.
And I'll work with our city clerk and coordinate that. Last item to come up is housekeeping as well as working with our police chief. By code and by state code and our local city code, the one item that this came up, and while we were at it, we thought we should address other issues, is under state code, the language is may, and dealing with officers when they leave our employment, they may be able to acquire their service weapon, purchase the handgun for $1. Our city code said shall. Our chief wants to have it line up more with the state law as may, because there may be instances where someone leaves our organization and quite frankly, we wouldn't feel comfortable with that individual having a firearm. So we don't want to participate in handing them for $1 their service weapon. So that's one of the changes. And then while we were at it, when we went through and we amended our city code on miscellaneous criminal charges, there were a couple things that we missed, my fault, which were references. The code change that it's referenced to had been eliminated, and the new one has been moved when we renumbered everything. So there's a little bit of housekeeping there. Any questions on those issues?
I agree with that fact that may be the term we want to use, because there can come some folks that we don't want to have. We're going to have that weapon, even if it's only $1. But that's my thoughts on that.
And we may want to look at some legislation that might be going through the General Assembly right now regarding using the term with resignation. There was one incident where an individual did resign from their position, but it was done so honorably because they're moving into another position, and under the current law, they weren't eligible to purchase their firearm. But this was a person who was in good standing. So I don't know if this needs to be put off for any reason. I don't particularly think it does, but I haven't had a chance to delve through it deeply.
Well, what we can do is if that goes through, we will again amend at the end of the General Assembly. But I would like to do this little housekeeping for the chief in the meantime.
That's a good idea. I'll follow up with you between now and full consideration if I have more questions.
Wonderful. Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you, sir.
And thank you. It was less than 30 minutes, Mayor. I just wanted to
All right. We'll call now on our city manager to introduce the briefing.
Good morning, Mayor and Council, and good news is this briefing will be a little bit shorter than we had anticipated as well, although Paul and Amelia don't know that, because we will be shortening the CIP section due to the inability to secure people because they were ill. So we'll talk a little bit about that at the end as well. This is our second briefing as we work to prepare the FY24 budget recommendation. You will recall that the first briefing, which came in January, of course, focused on the process that we use to develop the budget recommendation, as well as the budget calendar, and of course the real estate assessment information. The agenda for today's briefing is noted on the screen, and it really is to refresh everyone's memory of the priorities, both those that council and administration have in the formation of the budget, provide greater specificity on local tax revenue projections. Of course, we provided some of that information through the real estate assessment information. This will take that a little bit further and again specify a little bit more detail with that. As well, we'll cover the net tax revenue projections, and of course that's where we show sort of the breakdown between the funds that we can expect to receive to put toward our budget versus those that, of course, by formula go to school or our special districts, and that'll be covered in that section as well. We also intend on providing greater specificity on the priority expenditures. Those are predominantly in two areas, which are the compensation and benefits, so we'll give a little more information on that, although we'll be giving even more information at the 2 o'clock session around that as well, and also some information around the inflationary costs and their impact on the budget, which is actually kind of spread throughout the presentation itself. We will, as mentioned, begin the discussion of the CIP, although we won't progress quite as far as perhaps we normally would this meeting. We'll talk about how we'll pick that up as we go into follow-on briefings as well. So most of today's briefing on the CIP will focus on the process that we use to actually generate the CIP projects, review those, and then it'll show you kind of a reminder of what was approved with the current year CIP, all fund sources, and then in the next briefings we'll actually discuss an update on the 23 projects as well as start talking about 24. And then the subsequent briefing after that will cover the full 5 years of the CIP. So that'll unfold over a couple of briefings. As has been the past, we'll just be adding one, and we'll kind of explain that at the end, why we'll add that additional one. And then we'll conclude with a reminder of what the next steps are as we move forward. So that's what we're going to cover in the time that we have. Just as, again, as a reminder, the budget recommendation that will come forward will align with the council's strategic priorities as outlined in your strategic plan. This afternoon, you'll actually be receiving the draft version of the update of the plan, and then it's anticipated the February 21st meeting is when we'll actually be seeking approval of that strategic plan. And again, just as a reminder, there are in that plan, of course, 7 strategic priorities, one of which you just spent a couple hours talking about, which is the number 1 priority around education. But of course, we have those in community safety as well as transportation infrastructure, livability, and economic development, and so on. And so the budget that comes forward will continue to be aligned with those priorities. It will also be aligned with the priorities that we have discussed in our retreats, and those, of course, center around employee compensation as well as, again, the impact of inflation and how that's affecting some of the services and some of the purchases that we're responsible for making. The other thing, of course, we will continue with our ARPA investments. Just as a reminder, all of our funds, all the projects have been identified, but all of the funds need to be committed by December of 24 and expended by December of 26. There are a few exceptions to that, but not with our ARPA dollars that we're talking about here. A really good example that you'll be talking about in the next couple of meetings is around some of the specific ARPA funding that was received through HUD. And some of those dollars actually go all the way out to 2030. So we'll talk more about those. But for the most part, we'll have to have those dollars committed and spent by the end of 26. Then we will continue, obviously, with an emphasis on equity in each of our areas. These are
delivered in a number of different ways. Those include the departmental equity action plans, of course, the support of the EEAB, as well as the transition that has been underway for the last few years of our budget having an orientation toward equitable and empowering outcomes, in addition to the process that we've used in the past. And then finally, we will continue to be able to identify where is possible, as well as expand where is possible our funding relationships with the many community partners that we rely on in order to actually implement on those strategic priorities that you have identified through the plan as well. So again, that slide is really just intended to give sort of a reminder as to what those strategic priorities and administrative priorities are as we go forward. We'll delve a little bit deeper into some of those with the rest of the presentation. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Amelia, who's going to walk you through the local tax projections. And again, this is kind of taking what we talked about at the last meeting, starting with real estate and starting to look at our other categories of tax revenues and identifying kind of the projection as we start to build the 24 budget as we go forward. And I'll come back here in a couple of slides as well. But Amelia?
Mayor Lee, Vice Mayor Cobb, and members of City Council, good morning. Good morning. I have a lot of numbers for you today. For some of us, it is joy. For others, I will help you get through it. I will start off by saying also that the presentation that we're about to walk through with you is available on the internet for the public. For anyone who would like to access that, it is already available. As we begin here on slide 4, when we prepare... Sorry?
I'm sorry. Would you prefer to have questions, I guess because of the magnitude of what we're doing here with numbers, if somebody has a question, they can ask you as you go through these instead of waiting?
That's perfectly fine.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. As we prepare the briefing materials for you and for the public, as you know, our local tax revenue is a critical component of that. It is actually about 69 to 70% of the entire budget for the city of Roanoke. Today's local tax discussion is informed by using an analysis that took 4 years of local tax history, one of which was our most recent past fiscal year, which the audit is not yet completed and closed, but we do believe those numbers are not moving. But we also wanted to make sure we included pre-pandemic numbers and looking at how we have been recovering from the pandemic as well. We also have 5 months of actual revenues for the current fiscal year in our analysis, in which 2 of those months are accrual months back to the prior fiscal year. So we have a limited amount of current fiscal year information included in our numbers today. And thus you'll see on this slide the descriptions of an FY23 estimate and an FY24 projection, using that informed information. Slide 4 shows us fiscal 22 local tax actual results, again, which is approximately $14.6 million higher than our FY22 adopted budget level. That's about 7% higher. The main contributors to this $14.6 million were prepared food and beverage tax, sales tax, and transient occupancy tax. As was previously discussed with the school division, an appropriate 40% level was transferred to the school division. $2.4 million, you'll recall, was allowed for a personal property tax rebate. And 3/8 of the transient occupancy tax excess of $1.8 million, which equated to about $673,000 was transferred by formula to Visit Virginia's Blue Ridge. Moving into FY23, our current fiscal year, the adopted local taxes grew by 8.3%, or $17.5 million above our FY22 adopted budget. Likewise, the adopted local taxes were 1.3%, or about $2.9 or $3 million above our actual results for fiscal year '22. So our growth that's necessary is still going to have to increase, but the main contributor of that growth will likely come from our real estate tax, which, as we know, is historically reliable. Our current estimate for fiscal year '23 indicates that we could see a potential 3.5% higher attainment over the adopted budget levels. The main contributor for this potential may be from sales tax and prepared food and beverage taxes. Again, I have to stress that this is an early view of local taxes for the current fiscal year. As we close each month, as you know, we are doing a review of each of our local taxes, updating those projections, and likewise updating the amounts that would be allocated to the school division, Visit Virginia's Blue Ridge, and any other entity that has an allocation formula. I'll pause there to see if you have any questions about fiscal '23 before I move on to fiscal '24.
Mary Lee. But trying to make sure recognized before I just speak out of turn. So as you stated, I just want to make sure that the personal property tax numbers here do reflect post-rebate.
That is correct.
What occurred. Is the increase in the sales tax and the prepared foods and beverage tax what we're seeing just from more people going out spending, or is it an increase in the cost of items? Do you know what that might be attributed to?
It's a combination, I would say, of post-pandemic recovery as well as inflation impacts on our local economy.
Thank you.
Okay. If there aren't any further questions on fiscal '23, we'll look at fiscal '24. Currently, for fiscal year '24, the projections that have been developed indicate a potential 8.5% growth rate over the fiscal '23 adopted budget level, or about $19.3 million, with the main contributor, again, being real estate as presented in January, and that is followed by sales tax potential performance, prepared food and beverage taxes as well. As we return to City Council in upcoming briefings, these figures will be further refined with additional information that comes to us locally, as well as through General Assembly actions and our professional associations. We are very fortunate to have a relationship with the Commissioner of Revenue's office, who is sharing information regarding all of our local taxes, as well as trend information that our Treasurer's office is receiving as well. So very fortunate there to have that information as we look at these projections. On our next slide, slide 5, we'd like to look at the allocation of this potential $19.3 million growth. In the first column, you find our adopted FY23 allocation for Visit Virginia's Blue Ridge, $1.6 million, which is 3/8 of the anticipated collection of transient occupancy, current and delinquent taxes. Roanoke City Public Schools allocation of $92.5 million based on the funding formula, and the city's total adopted budget of $324.8 million. $141 million approximately of that is local taxes, and that's about 44.5% of our total budget once you exclude the Roanoke City Public Schools portion. Should we actually see that local tax projection growth of $19.3 million be maintained, the allocations of that growth are noted here on this slide. $337,500 of additional funding would be allocated to Visit Virginia's Blue Ridge. That's a 21.3% increase in that allocation. $7.6 million of additional funding would be allocated to Roanoke City Public Schools. That is an 8.2% increase. And the remaining growth of $11.4 million would be allocated with the city's general fund, and that is a 4.8% increase to the city's component. That is all of the projections that we have for today for, excuse me, for the FY24 budget. As we, again, come back to you in subsequent briefings, we will bring you non-local taxes and our anticipated impact on the expenditure side as well as the revenue side. But for today, the local tax estimates stand as we have them for today. Okay.
Mayor Lee?
Yes, sir.
I'm not sure whether or not this is a question appropriate for your department, but have there been conversations with Visit Virginia's Blue Ridge regarding the establishment of a tourism improvement district that would allow for either additional or substitute revenue from another source that could be used towards that sector of the economy?
Okay.
Yes, Ms. Pretty, there has been. There were conversations started kind of right as we rolled into COVID, and of course those suspended at that time. There has since been some additional conversation regarding that. There is an interest. There is an interest from some of the hoteliers as well as from BVR, so I do think there'll be more conversations coming forward. And it would be probably, it's viewed as an additional source of revenue, not as a replacement source of revenue.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. My understanding is no other body has yet established one in this state, and I think maybe in Northern Virginia they're going to put one together first. But that would allow for a source of funds that goes specifically to that sector of the economy to come from their own source.
At this point, we will.
You taking this one?
I can.
Okay. I know. I didn't remember what word you had.
We did want to overlay the discussion with discussion that we typically have with council about the inflation-adjusted view of where we find ourselves. If we look as far back as fiscal year 2013, with our base of $251.5 million, and we look at the impact of inflation as we've come up to 2023, we do see that our budget itself has grown about $73.3 million. However, the buying power, we've seen an actual decrease of almost 10%, 9.6%. That though we've grown, again, $73.3 million, our buying power has actually decreased. If you asked someone, an economist, they would likely tell you that that line is going to continue to decline as we see our actual results in fiscal 23, perhaps not as steep as what we've seen previously, but we are still not at a point where we have even reached back to fiscal year 2013. Just to give us, I hate to be pessimistic about this conversation, but a realistic view of where we are in terms of the buying power and what we can do with what we collect. The expensive nature of what we need to purchase to provide the continued services that we provide, as well as the impact of even the growth that we anticipate could occur with our local tax base.
And I think in the briefing that you all just had with the joint meeting with the school board, of course, they had a slide very similar to this. So what Amelia is pointing out here actually reverberates, obviously, through our other funding partners, the amount of money through formula that we provide to the schools, as well as the money that they receive from the states, kind of similarly. Though the dollar amount of their budget to the revenue available is increasing, it's increasing at a rate that does not keep up with the costs associated with inflation. And so you saw that in the briefing as well with one of our partners. And I trust that if you looked at some of the other folks in the community that similarly are partners, you'd see the same kind of slide most likely.
Yes, and these are reflective of our most recent CPI numbers.
Ms. Merchant, we're looking at $227 million. Do you have any idea? I know it's far-fetched, but do you have any idea about 2024? What our buying power might look like, just as it will
be significantly lower, I think. I should say it will be lower
lower. And the reason I say that is because if you look at what the CPI currently is, so this is based off of the CPI, and of course in 23 and in 24, the expectation is inflation, though starting to moderate, will still be high. And as I've shared with you all before too, the CPI is the best measure we have to use, but that measure is really a household measure. The things that we buy, an example I've used is the cost of cars has gone up to the consumer, to our residents. The cost of fire trucks and ambulances, which we buy, of course, has gone up disproportionately higher than that. We build bridges, not houses, so those costs are accelerating as well. So I think our purchasing power will actually continue to decrease as we go out into time.
Yeah, that was the reason I was asking the question, because I'm thinking ahead at the big projects we have, like the bridge and et cetera, and
you'll see that reflected in the CIP numbers when we get to those.
Oh, okay, we haven't gotten
those
there. Okay.
Costs are going up, and so more of our money is having to go to those projects.
Right, even though we are looking at somewhat of a surplus, we're still looking at some big deficits when it comes to our purchasing power.
Yes.
Something was noted about vehicle prices. I understand that large fleets, the cost is continuing to still be rather large, but my understanding is that the personal property tax numbers, preliminary estimates are showing that they are leveling back out. We shouldn't have an unreasonable increase in the value of our vehicles.
Correct. Ryan indicates that we are not going to see any appreciable increase nor decrease, that it should be stable over the course of the current fiscal year and into next year. So we have not built any measurable increase nor decrease into those numbers.
So we likely wouldn't find ourselves in the need for a rebate situation like last year.
Not based on what I have been told.
So, thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to switch now briefly from sort of those updated revenue numbers. So again, one of our objectives here was to give you a little more specificity in what we're anticipating in terms of revenue, and I want to do the same on the expenditure side. So the slide that Amelia just shared with you, of course, shows sort of our buying power, if you will, with time. So now let me share with you, and again, these are items we've shared previously. We've talked about these in the retreat as well as other briefings, but just want to continue to remind you and us what we're sort of working toward. And if you go, I'm going to step back just for a second and kind of remind. So if you look at one of the numbers to keep in mind as we talk about this is that projected 11.3 million. So that projected 11.3 million out of these sources of revenue is what we have available in order to meet the expenditures that we anticipate bringing forward in the budget. Now, the key to that is, as Amelia has mentioned, that $11 million number is not the entirety of our sources of revenue, but it is the source of more than 40% of our revenue. So we would expect revenues to increase slightly more than what's shown on there, but it's a good number to kind of reflect on as we go through these. So in terms of sort of those top line expenditures, so the items that you all and we have identified as priorities, at the top of that list has been and is employee compensation. And so I just want to kind of walk through a little bit of this. And again, later today, we'll actually go into a little more detail in a briefing around some of the details of the compensation increase. But it consists of a couple of different parts. One of those has been the first priority, which was the implementation of a public safety step pay plan. And as you all know, we have completed that this year with the police department, and we anticipate completing the third and final phase of that step pay plan next year with fire, EMS, and with the sheriff's office. So that's one of those expenditures moving forward. We estimate that cost to be somewhere around $2.5 million to move to that phase 3. A second component of that compensation increase is the initiation of the general employees, so the non-public safety employees, and moving them to what will probably be the first of 3 phases as well. That first phase is at this point intended to be movement of all of the employees to at least the minimum, the new minimum of the new pay grade. Of course, you all know we had an assessment study done. Again, we'll go into more detail on this later. And that study identified what compensation pay grades should look like in order for us to meet the current market. And there was also another table that was designed to exceed the market. We talked a little bit about that in the briefing earlier. We are not in a position to attempt to exceed the market. So our efforts are focused on meeting the market as we move forward. That first phase is estimated to be somewhere around $5 million associated with that. So that's the second piece of the compensation part that we're moving forward as a priority. The third piece of that are our benefits. Obviously, compensation represents a significant element of what it is that we are attempting to address with our employees, but obviously, as is always the case, our benefits that we offer, whether those are health insurance, with medical, workers' compensation, and so on, there are almost always increases in the cost to the city in delivering that. This is a reminder, of course, we're self-insured, so this is a case where we generate all the money that we need in order to meet the claims that are necessary in moving forward. We don't have an outside party that brings those dollars in. Those are generated by dollars that we provide either through general funds and or through contributions from the employees as well. So we anticipate an increased cost in that arena. In the last several years, we've been able to absorb the entirety of that cost through our general fund contributions, thereby allowing the employees to receive the full benefit of their compensation increase, so they didn't have that eroded by increasing their the benefits cost with that. So again, that's estimated at about $625,000. And then the other piece of the benefit side of it is the pension fund. So of course, we have similarly we have our own pension fund that we're responsible for ensuring the viability of. We had already anticipated. If you remember last year, we had, as did everyone, kind of record returns on our investments. And we actually were up in the upper 90s in terms of liability coverage, which is a phenomenal place to be with pensions. And at that time, we had anticipated an increase into our pension fund associated with actuarial liabilities. So every few years, we actually have our actuaries go through and evaluate the folks that are covered under our pension. And the reality is, thank goodness, everybody's living longer. Of course, that costs more to actually be able to do. So there was an anticipated contribution into the fund to address that. It was somewhere around $1.5 million that was necessary to go into that. Of course, those record returns of one year were followed by record losses across, again, everyone's investments. If any of you have 401ks or any other kind of investment, you've seen that reflected in your statements as well. We are no different. Our investments similarly were impacted by that. And in order for us to ensure the long-term viability of the pension fund, there is an additional contribution necessary to place within that, probably over the next several years. Our fund is set up so that we can absorb increases over a period of years rather than all at one time. And I should say that this is an experience that's being borne by pretty much every pension fund there is, including VRS. VRS will be making similar contributions going forward. So our expectation is that that's somewhere around $5.5 million in total. So those are the three kind of components to the compensation piece that are at the top line priority. And then, of course, as was just discussed a few moments ago, in terms of inflationary impacts, our cost of actually buying things, whether those, again, are fire trucks, whether those are ambulances, whether those are technology, whether that's building a building or a bridge, are all increasing and increasing significantly. In some cases, that is requiring us, and we'll be talking about this over the next several briefings, is requiring us to have to actually either forego or delay certain capital projects. It is also, in some cases, requiring us to place more dollars into those capital projects. It is estimated that we'll need to increase our debt service by another $1 million. Again, some of that is anticipated. Every year we anticipate adding to that debt service. This is slightly higher because of the inflationary impacts. So those are sort of the top line, top priority expenditures that we're aware of. And of course, at the top of this, right now that is somewhere in the $14 million range. I will point us back to that number that we shared earlier, which is that 11.3-ish million dollars that we expect to receive out of revenues. And you can sort of start seeing already that where we are from just a priority expenditure standpoint, we are currently out of balance. But again, I will stress that those revenues that Amelia went over are still only a part of the revenue picture. So our job over the next couple of months is to actually fulfill that revenue picture or complete it, and then figure out what we can actually do off of these expenditures And those are not the only expenditures, obviously. Those are the top expenditures, but we do also know that undoubtedly, as is the case in every legislative session, there are statutory mandates that come to us that we were not anticipating, either sometimes loss of revenue, in other instances, increased costs. We don't know what those will be yet, but we'll be quite surprised if those don't arrive as well. That's tied to other General Assembly actions. Those could be revenue impacts, or they could be service level. They could be require us to do something that we were not doing before, or something differently that has a cost associated with it. They can also be positive, as they were last year when we received additional 599 funding. It was actually that 599 funding that allowed us to accelerate the phasing of the police increase for their step pay plan, that allowed us to move it into 2 steps instead of 3. So there certainly can be some positive from a revenue standpoint coming out of the General Assembly actions as well that we will account for going forward. Then there are, so far what we've discussed are things that we, in order to just keep doing what we're doing, basically, there are also always supplemental requests from our departments. So either increases in service level, replacement of things that otherwise aren't on the lists that we have, or other kinds of things. We haven't even accounted for any of those yet. And then, of course, there are contractual increases. We have a number of arrangements that have built-in contractual increases based off of cost of living or some other factor that have to be accounted for. And then finally, second to finally, our external partners. These are, the city is capable and thankfully is in the position to fund many of our partners to some level of degree. And these are partners that go beyond kind of our school partners. Some of those include our participation in things like the Regional Planning Commission or the Regional Partnership and Economic Development. Those go beyond the arrangements that we have with, for example, the schools. But this also includes all of our nonprofit social service providers and others that we also contribute or provide contributions for. I can assure you that my office has seen a very steady stream of those individuals, likewise concerned about their cost increases, and my expectation is that they will be seeking additional funding from the city as well as from their other sources of revenue. And then finally, as has been mentioned in the briefing we had earlier, we have, of course, our reserves, which we were obligated to be able to maintain at specified levels in order both to prevent us or protect us against any kind of significant economic downturn, but also in order to maintain our credit ratings, in order to be able to keep the cost of borrowing as low as it possibly can be. Part of our tactic with that is if indeed our current year revenues end up higher than what was than our expenditures, then one of the things we're able to do is shift some of those dollars to cover some of those costs, which will help us because it'll be one less burden going into the FY24. So those are the priority expenditures. Obviously, the majority of the work that we're doing over the next few months and what we'll be sharing with you fall into those categories, figuring out what expenditures will align with our revenue projections and therefore present to you a balanced budget as we move forward. If there are any questions, I'll take those. Otherwise, we're going to shift to just what the rest of the development process is, and then I'm going to hit the CIP real high level.
I just have one quick question, if it's okay, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Cowell, do you know when you will get back with us on the amounts to be determined for the different sectors and those employees? Will we have to wait for the next briefing, or
are you talking about for the compensation piece? That'll be this afternoon.
Oh, this afternoon?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to do that during the measure that you have. You have an item that has 4 measures associated with pay ordinance.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Let me go down the line. I'll come to Mr. Sanchez Jones.
Quick question, Mr. Cowell. How much did a fire truck cost before the pandemic?
It depends on what kind of truck it is. I mean, so you'll see prices ranging from $600,000 up to $1.2 million for a truck. And the other complication is, and this is especially true with ambulances, the delivery time has become extraordinary. So it may take 2 years to actually take receipt of a fire truck or of an ambulance. Which the complication of that is, once we know there's a need, then we have to start actually programming the funding, and in some cases we may have to program that funding earlier to ensure delivery at the time that we need it. So that's been the bigger impact than even the cost.
And what price do you estimate that is going to cost?
for
For the, an ambulance?
An ambulance.
Or a fire truck?
150,000 for the ambulance.
And for the ladder truck?
For the ladder, 2.5. What? For the ladder truck, yeah. So over $2 million for the ladder truck, yeah. And the ambulance, I know, in talking with the chief, that was at least an 18-month, if not 24-month cycle for delivery of it. So that's been, and then, in the case of fire trucks in particular, they're essentially handmade by just a couple of different vendors. So it takes a very long time to get those.
And they're very specific to the localities and their needs.
They are. Yeah.
Go ahead.
So what is at a minimum the difference you find between our expected expenditures and the projected revenue that's coming in? I know you said there may be higher revenues this year that we could use, but it's only going to be like one-time funding. That won't be the ongoing funding that we need to really cover these long-time expenditures.
Absolutely. So what we try to do is we try to look at the things, particularly that Amelia showed, that we feel like you can rely pretty consistently on. Real estate's a very stable type of revenue, sales tax to some degree. So what we try to do is fit those things in that we expect to be definitely ongoing expenditures, compensation, for example, falling within that category. Other things that we would anticipate being, they may be expensive this year or next year, but we may not have that same expense forward. We can use different approaches. But yeah, as a rule of thumb, you really should be trying to look at what you're pulling out of sort of the growth you expect out of real estate and maybe sales tax, and see what you can fit within that is an ongoing expense associated with it, and then start looking at the other categories for the other items.
I guess the point I was trying to get at was that as we're, I'm sure, all receiving requests from external partners for increased funding, I see at a minimum at least $2.5 million between our expected revenue to the city itself and not our partners, and our priorities that we need to fund, absent the amounts to be determined this afternoon.
Yes. That's been, that is the challenge, again, that we'll work through over the next few months. But yes, that's exactly the challenge is always in front of us at this time of the year. But we are making a much more aggressive, we have been making, with your help over the last couple of years, a much more aggressive move on compensation than we have in the past. And that definitely is going to affect what we can do supplemental or with our external partners.
And I did have a question with regards to your supplemental requests. You mentioned the contractual increases as well as the inflationary impacts. As you know, during our one of the budget retreats, during the budget retreat, council's retreat, we discussed the outsourcing and that we would get some kind of breakdown of the companies that we outsource to. I'm taking that the contractual increases for the supplementals reflect that.
Could be. Some of them are that. Some of them may be as simple as the contracts we have for copy machines, for example, that might have something built into it that would have an automatic inflationary kind of adjustment. A lot of our outsourcing contracts are fixed price, so you don't see the increase with them. But some of them do have kind of an escalator built into them as well. So it's really just kind of hit and miss. And some of them are relatively low increases. Again, use my copy machine example, and some of them are fairly large. So that's what we're kind of combing through now. And we'll come forward at some point with a number that shows what those contractual in total are, and then we can dig deeper if we need to.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. All right, with that, I'm going to let Paul explain next steps in the process, and then again, I'm going to touch very briefly on capital.
Good afternoon. Yeah, it is. 6 minutes after. So my slide today is actually a very simple one, because this first February briefing is usually one of our more brief briefings, and we will get into some more detail at our next briefing on March 6th. So just to kind of tell you about the process, over the next month, the staff, along with the budget committee, will begin really doing a deep dive into all of the supplemental requests that have been submitted by the directors and managers. And as you know, this year we are implementing a new system and a new process. along with Resource X, where we are evaluating all of the programs and their inventories, different programs that the departments offer. And so along with that, of course, comes a little bit of pain in getting used to a new system. And so we are currently reviewing those and making sure that the departments have submitted their budgets as they had intended. So that is really the first step in where we are today. The Budget Committee will meet typically once or twice a week, and then we'll be prepared to bring you something on March 6th that will provide some more in-depth on those supplemental requests, where we'll break things down by what's discretionary and non-discretionary, as we typically have in the past. Of course, behind the scenes, a lot of times the Budget Committee is looking at the details of those supplemental requests and evaluating the responses by the directors as far as how their offers align with the equity impacts and whether they've done any lean initiatives or sought efficiencies and all those sort of lovely details. And so after that, well, as a part of that also, we will look at our external agencies, and their offers are due to us on February 9th, so this week on Thursday at the end of the day. The Human Services Board and the Roanoke Arts Commissions, I believe that they've already had all of their applications submitted, but for general fund applications, those should be due this week, and the Budget Committee will review those once we've had a chance to dissect all of them. The Budget Committee will also review any fee adjustments that have been submitted, and we'll bring any of those to you on March 6th as well. And then, of course, as I've mentioned, the March 6th briefing will be more, we'll have more information at that particular meeting. And I believe there's going to be some adjustments to the CIP schedule. Bob, I didn't know if you, since we're making some adjustments to the plan today.
February 21st, we'll come back with another piece of the CIP that I'll talk about here at the end. So there'll actually be two briefings in February and then our regular briefing March 6th.
Right, so February 20th, we'll begin we'll continue the CIP discussion, and then March 20th as well. We should have a full CIP discussion along with our municipal advisors, and after that we have the April 3rd briefing, and then April 17th will be the recommended budget. Yeah.
So I'm going to just very quickly give you an update. This had intended, and thankfully with time it worked out well, it had intended to be a little bit more information. However, several of the people that were involved in this are not available, or in Chris Chittum's case, today was his first day back and he's sick, so he would be doing a piece of this presentation. So just as a reminder that with this current budget, we initiated a complete refresh on our CIP process. You heard that alluded to actually by Mr. Perkins at the school board, which was a part of that joint effort in doing so. So together, we actually completely changed the way in which we generate capital projects, as well in the way in which we review them, and in the way in which we present them both to you and to the public. There is a subsequent second phase that I'll talk about with that as well that has to do with project management also. This effort has been led by Chris Chittum out of our office. If you remember, he gave a couple presentations last year about the changes that were made. And so I'm just going to real quickly remind everyone kind of those changes as we went through. So the process is, again, where there are the capital improvement program. This is the program where we look out at least 5 years as to what we expect to be spending dollars on. Inside our master plans that I'll talk about in a few moments, those look out further. So those tend to look out 10, maybe even further years out into it as well. We want the process, when we started this, we wanted the process to be more transparent. We wanted it to be much more aware of the large investments that are being made in the community, regardless of funding source. Historically, we had shown and presented the council and the public the debt-funded piece, but there are also grant-funded CIP, there are cash-funded CIP, so now the CIP covers much more of that, much more broadly. They are a tool to implement our master plans and comprehensive plans. As is the case with the schools, they are also a tool to further our equity in our community. We've talked about that in a number of ways and some of the tools that we use associated with that. They're also this new process would be a responsible and strategic use of resources through planning and priority setting. So, when we're talking about the kind of dollars we're talking about, it's essential that we actually plan well ahead in advance and actually program those. These are not decisions that, by and large, can be made every year afresh. You need to be looking out, in some cases, a decade in order to progress toward the kind of expenditures and the kinds of investments that are being made.
Mr. Powell, can I
Yes.
ask you a quick
Yes.
question? Are those tools, are they similar to what the school board, the
Somewhat.
RCPS uses, the matrix or whatever? So
We have one
something
built
in-house
into
like
our into the Resource X, into the budgeting process that Paul mentioned. So not only do we have that for CIP, we actually have that for every program that's proposed. So every supplemental request that comes forward, there's an evaluation against whether it's addressing disparities and what those disparities are. So all of that is embedded in our process.
So you have
as
sort of
well.
a numbers at the end, or you just kind of rank them, or what, how is it?
Yeah, there's actually points. They're weighted based on the answers to those questions, and then that becomes part of what the budget committee considers whether they're going to move for one of those projects forward or not. Much like they had mentioned, the subcommittee that they have looks at those projects and whether they move.
Yeah,
those
and then it
forward.
goes to the school board. But it was
Yeah.
pretty concise. I thought it was very
it's
helpful.
it's definitely, those tools are very helpful because, again, it removes a little bit of the subjectiveness. It actually adds some evaluation criteria in each of those.
Can we see yours at some point?
Sure. So again, as mentioned, we moved from where before CIP was generally classified as those projects requiring debt funding to now every project that is going to have an asset over $100,000 regardless of funding source, and it provides a much fuller picture of the city's investments being made. So the way the process works is items are nominated for inclusion. Those come from a variety of different departments. They come from a variety of different documents. So those documents include, as mentioned, the master plan. So think of things like our library master plan, a Parks and Recreation master plan, those types of things, as well as other strategies that have been identified by council through other means, whatever those might be. That might have been ARPA, the work that we did with the ARPA funding. It might have been other kinds of grants that we're doing as well. So all those documents are what inform then the candidate projects as they move their way through the process. And again, different people actually make those recommendations up to the committee that's working on that. Those are also evaluated against the operating budget because many of the capital expenditures come with additional operating expenditures, so we have to be aware of those as well. And then ultimately, the information that's going forward is presented out publicly. And the new step that was added is, and this is a common step in communities that we did not have here, that is actually the CIP it's proposed is actually reviewed by the Planning Commission. And the reason for that is it's seeking consistency with the comprehensive plan. So we shouldn't be making investments, obviously, that are in conflict with that piece. It's a fairly common process that we had not used here that is now a part of these efforts. As mentioned and as seen on the screen again, all the different plans that are used to help inform the capital projects that are nominated, and then those evaluations that occur, the information is again pushed out publicly as it works its way through. And then at the end of the day, more of the information is available. The second phase that I mentioned is actually tied around project management itself. So that's the next piece we're working on, which is to enhance the way in which the community is engaged both in the development of CIPs. So Main Street Wasena Bridge is a really good example of that, where we've used that newer process that has an ongoing community engagement dealing with the business areas as well as the neighborhoods, as well as stakeholders like bicyclists and others that are using the bridge itself. That's a process very different than what we had historically used. So the next phase is to actually enhance that so that all of our large capital projects, Michael Clark and his folks are going through that right now with the Eureka Recreation Center as an example. Similarly, during construction, also increasing in the awareness of what's going on and the public engagement as well. Some of that will come through the website. Some of that will come through periodic updates to the media as well as periodic updates on our Facebook. Some of that will come through community meetings as the project progresses during construction as well. So that's the second phase that Chris will be taking on with that. And then, again, we're not going to go into detail on this. I just want to remind everyone of the kinds of projects that we have in the current year of the CIP with your current budget, which includes buildings, fleet capital replacements, park and recreation items, school improvements, street sidewalks, bridges, and other infrastructure, technology improvements, stormwater, and, of course, Berglund Center renovations. A number of these you all had the benefit of being able to see when we did the CIP tour as a part of our retreat, and we will be doing that again as well, so that you'll be able to see some of these other projects that I'll share with you and the progress that they're making as well. And then this is in its totality, and I know it's very small on here, but in its totality, this is what was approved in the CIP. And again, you can see in this case, it now shows all the projects that were debt funded, as well as the projects that were cash funded, as well as the projects that were grant funded. So in total, for FY23, there was an approved $69.6 million worth of projects. Of that $69.6 million, $46.2 million was funded through debt. And that's the debt that was issued, obviously, for this year. You will see, obviously, something similar coming forward in the FY24 budget with what the requests are for the upcoming year. You will also see, and is not in this presentation, this will come in the subsequent presentations, in addition to the first year, the one that's getting approved in that year's budget, you will, of course, see the next 4 years that are projected as well, so that you have a sense of what's coming in those next 4 years. And for us, that's necessary for our financial advisors to advise us on the right combination of debt issuances and cash and grants. It also informs us against our the adopted policies that we have relative to debt issuances. And this is why it's so critical that we were able to take the step we did with the schools to ensure that their projects were included in this as well, so that they can be evaluated alongside those debt policies also. And again, at your next meeting, the next briefing on the 21st, we'll give a little more update, a little more detail on some of these projects and where they are in the process of implementation. And we will start to show with you kind of the draft of the projects that we've identified for possible inclusion in the FY24 portion of the CIP. And then again, a subsequent briefing, as Paul said, we'll see the full CIP that we're talking about and hear from our financial advisors as to the combination, again, of debt issuances and where we are with our debt policy as we move forward. So that is the extent of the update on the CIP, and we'd be happy to answer any questions. And if there are none, I thank you for that, and we will again be back, talk a little bit more about CIP on the 21st. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. All right, if there are no questions, the council will be in recess until 2 o'clock this afternoon for our closed meetings in the council conference room.